Hey, YouTube. How is it going? I hope all is well. Today is going to be a fun afternoon full of all kinds of fun little bits of data that you probably don't give a shit about because, you know. All right, guys. Welcome all, far and few between. The reason we're doing this emergency is because I have not yet gotten a correct answer on the last game that we have played. So obviously I'm not going to give it away because I've given you the answer probably 3 times already and nobody's gotten it again. Yes, we're doing the hands thing again. So, with that being said, I'm gonna end that game obviously, but since I'm not gonna redo anything kind of on that one, I'm not gonna give away anything on that. We're gonna have to do another one. And yes, somebody knows their whiskeys really well. This is more, bourbon whiskey. All right. So yeah, we got the good stuff tonight. Cheers to that. And if you don't already, you should have your drink of choice within arm's reach at all time. Colby, sis, is a new person here. And let me see here. There was something. It didn't do it earlier for me. I think I know why now too. Hold on. We're gonna make things interesting here. All right, you manage people. There's a couple of you in here that can manage people. Just play nice, everybody. All right. Anyway, so there's a lot. You just wait. There's a lot going on. So obviously the other game that I was playing, like I mentioned, has kind of ran its course. Nobody's going to get the answer, I don't think. And I gave it away. Like, I literally gave you the answer, and nobody has gotten it figured out yet. So I slipped you guys up pretty good on that one. I have another new game. That's why this is your last chance. If you're not here, you're not going to know. And if you don't know, then you don't have another opportunity to get another point. So, more or less, I'm going to just get it out real quick, real simple. I posted another post just recently, just a little bit ago, about 15 minutes ago. So, Andy, I'll talk to you in a bit. Give me a call later. So, anyway, where was I? I posted a post just a few minutes ago. All right. And I think I know part of the reason why nobody's got anything going on right now is nobody's watched the last video that I did. It's kind of hard to know what the hell is going on unless you actually watch the video. The one prior to that, the one that the actual game was in, kicked butt. Like everybody was kind of having a good time in that one. But the last video I did that actually showed the sound of the amp, like nobody watched it. So I'm a little bit bummed about that, but that's just how it goes because I can't freaking give an amp away. That's just all it is. But so you have basically a last chance opportunity here. YDNA, Team YDNA over there, he's kind of capped out already. We're going to talk about that in a minute here. So if you're on this, you actually have an opportunity to get another point. And my hope is that we'll kind of round it out to an even. We'll show you what the numbers are here in just a minute. But let's just kind of look at this here. So this is what the giveaway amp is. If you have not been here yet and have not seen anything that's going on, this is what you are winning right now. So look at that. I mean, isn't that beautiful? Oh my God, if that were a girl right there. So most of the things about this amp were kind of voted on by you guys. Oh gosh, you guys keep it easy in here, okay? I'm not kidding. You guys can argue all you want, but not on my channel. Let's just keep it that way, all right? So this guy right here is what everybody's been vying for, if you want to call it vying for. I'm using my quotation fingers. But all of you have kind of voted on the direction that this thing went. From the color of the Tolex to the name on the amp, that's pretty much where most of your input came from. And I just kind of rattled things around from, around that. The leather corners thing is kind of my deal. That's what I like to do, and I like having a real backdrop on the back of the amp. Most of them are just boring and stuff like that, so I put a logo and did some nice stuff to it. the all hand fitted, metal edging and stuff like that. And then, yeah, we're just trying to make as high a quality of an amp as we possibly can. If you, obviously, I'm not showing the inside gut shots here, but if you do actually want to see what the inside gut shots look like, this whole series has been well documented. There's spots where you can literally sit there and glean at it for an hour if you want. So just definitely check it out. I put everything into a playlist, and I do have a playlist related to this amplifier. The same playlist that this live is actually listed in currently. So, we have some people that are likely to win at this point. And let's actually kind of make sure I'm set up on the right page for that. There we go. All right, so let's go on over to my desktop here. All right, so as you can see, this is kind of the scoreboard at the moment. So we've got a total of, 35 individuals that have gotten their name into the hat. Somehow or another, 35 people managed to get their name into a hat. For a total of 86 points. So that's 86 tickets, right? So Internet Money, who I've dumbed down from all of his acronyms and as known as, AKAs, if you will. He's got a total of 10 points. He is capped, though. He's got the handicap. Now, there's a reason why he has the most points, all right? I know this is kind of boring to watch. It's nothing exciting today, but you get to find out why you're losing right now. So, John, Internet Money, a.k.a. Team YDNA, a.k.a. Team A-Tech, he's put in the most effort since the beginning of this whole thing. Since the moment I said go, Homeboy's been on the drop. First in just about every time and almost every time. And he's gotten all the answers right of all the games. So he's playing the game to a T. So he's probably, between all of his accounts, he actually had more than 10 points combined with them. So we had to obviously give him everyone else a handicap and give him a nerf, if you will. As you can see, he's double everyone else, the next person he's double of. There's a few names in here, obviously, you probably know. There's a few you probably haven't heard of. Having anything at all right now is probably worth something, though. So they're not in any particular order. I think it was just, I literally set it up so it was highest points and in alphabetical order. I can't see the comments right now, so don't bother with me. But it wouldn't bother me to round this out to 38, 40, maybe 50 total people and get the ticket count up over 100. It's just going to make the game a little bit more interesting for everybody in all. But as you can see, we've got a total of 86 currently. And Internet Money does not get to earn any more points. But there will be some concessions for him, no doubt, because I'm sure he's going to get into the top. I'm only going to do a top 3. Basically, the top 3 all get a T-shirt, of course, and then the winner, which will be much like Andy's thing, where the last person out of the box gets gets to win. So we'll see how that goes. As you may or may not have recalled from the last the giveaway that Andy had done, I want to say that there was one individual who bought one round of tickets, and he ended up in the top 5 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was T-Man, and somehow luck of the draw worked out where he was in the top 5 out of a set of 5 tickets 3 times. So not a bad way to come out on it. But yeah. So we need to change this up a little bit. We can add some points to some people. I apologize if it doesn't seem correct to you or others. I did go through with my AI, Miss Aurora. Yes, I got my AI person to name itself. But Aurora, she picked her own name, by the way. I didn't pick it for her. But she helped me go through all of the games, and she helped me go through all of the transcripts and all that fun stuff. I spent a few hours the other day conglomerating all of this, and this is what we came up with. So it might not be 100% accurate, but it's freaking accurate enough. So there's that. And it's my game, and I can do whatever the hell I want. So there. All right, so let's go back to me, because it's all about me. All right. So, I hope everything's clear. Blank Blessed had 10. Yeah. Okay, so let me go kind of back up a little bit here and get through some of these comments that I missed. Thank you. I love the corners. The corners are definitely my thing. And there's the wife trying to call me right now. Sorry, lady. She doesn't know. Let's see here. Screenshot this. I won. Blessed had 10. Yeah, James had 5. Was it James that was in there like 3? I know he made it to the last round or something like that. Or made it to the top 5, or was it T-Man that had the 3? I can't remember exactly. I know it was one of them. I thought it was T-Man because he had to give away a couple. I could be wrong. I don't know. I bop in and out on all these things. But in either case, so that was a really cool raffle. I did not make it to the top 5, and I had 10 tickets in there. So, 1. Yeah. Okay, cool. Hey, more the merrier. So here's also what's going on. So we got my giveaway coming up here in the next few weeks. Let's see, it's the 8th today. I'm probably going to try to push it for the 19th or the 20th, because if it doesn't happen then, I am not going to be able to do it the following weekend because I took on another gig because I'm a glutton for punishment. I got an offer that basically I couldn't refuse. So I get to take out half of my PA system, more or less, and myself for the day, and it's just, but 3 in the top 5. That's freaking nuts. So there's that. I'm going to try to do it next weekend. If I can't get it done next weekend, it's probably not going to happen until the 3rd or the 4th of October, which not a bad time, I think, to get it done. It's a way to bring in fall, right? So that's the plan at the moment. Oh, you haven't won. We already know that the one person that had the most tickets is the one who won, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be you. There's a couple close seconds there. Dan Bronson or Bradson. I can't remember his name, but I apologize if I butchered it. But anyway, so there's that. I'm going to try to get that done on Thursday. Thursday is going to be a neat day for me. On Thursday, the Cerberus from Andy comes and arrives here. The chassis for my build, which is going to involve these guys, will be here. So I have all the parts. On Thursday, I'll have all the parts to do my build on, get that started and going. And the T-shirts that I ordered today should be in on Thursday as well. So it's going to be Christmas for Luke on Thursday this week. That's why I wanted to do this meeting today. Tomorrow I'm going to go help my friend put in some flooring. And Wednesday, God is going to rest. I'm kidding. I'm not God. But on Wednesday, I'm going to take a break. And then Thursday, we get rolling again. I'll probably do another video on Wednesday because Andy's hot sauce will be in my possession. And I am down to try some hot sauce and give a little review of that. He's saying that I'm going to be burning out both ends. I love it hot, by the way, just so you know. I want it to burn. I want it to know what it's going in and coming out, as gross as that sounds. So there is that. In other news as well, what was there? That was kind of the big news, but the Cerberus is kind of the one I wanted to touch on the more. Yeah, not that much fun. So the Cerberus. Andy sent it to me in hopes that I would want to keep it. It's not that I don't want to keep it. I'm sure I'm going to love the amp. There's nothing about that. Oh, I'm always in trouble. Just ask my wife. Yeah, no, we've been working on it for a while, and he had this section that he had to do. He had to level out the concrete, and I've been telling him, like, dude, get the freaking concrete leveled, and we'll move forward with that. And he finally got it done. Finally. So a project that we started probably 3 months ago, we can finally get going down and hopefully get the hallway finished up and be done with that project. So, yay! In either case, so yeah, the Cerberus is coming my way. Andy wanted me to keep it. I think he was hoping more to gift it to me in hopes that I would be interested in keeping it. It's not that I don't want to keep it. That's not what it is. It's just I know that we can turn it into something more and do something else with it. But in either case, what the plan is for that is I have a set of power and output transformers that we can put in there to put it back to what it once was, more as it was when it was originally built. And based on my mathematics and calculations and stuff like that, with a pair of EL34s, it'll land right at 50 watts, a hard 50 watts, by the way, too. With that transformer set, we'll have a solid, close to 500 volts on that one. It'll be one of my higher voltage designs. We're going to kind of keep that one more in the ilk that Andy, of course, likes to do, but it'll be, properly done up in that regard. And then I guess there's some modifications that we need to do to the gain channel, and he had suggested a few things to me, and we'll do that. So you guys, you could just ignore each other, just saying. We don't need to hash things out here. You guys have each other's numbers. So if you guys don't want to do that, then we can force the matter myself, because I'm that kind of guy anyway. But in either case, just forget it, or I'll have to end it. So, because you're just starting to, what's the word for it? Disturb my thought flow. Colby, where are you? You got powers too, Just saying. So, I hope everybody's still here. I got 16 viewers. That's great. We're losing people, I'm sure, by the minute, because I'm not very interesting. I've told you many a times, I'm not very interesting, and I don't have a whole heck of a lot of stuff to talk about. We kind of got through everything I wanted to talk about. But the big thing was the Cerberus. I think it's going to be cool. I'm also going to build a cabinet for that. It will be kind of my style, of course, so there will be a mirror in the back. I am going to do something a little bit different. And that little bit different is, instead of putting the faceplate like I normally do in the front, and I put my L on it, I don't even have one close by, so it doesn't matter. But, I have my, hold on, yes I do. We can just go right to here. So I have my L that goes across the vanity plate. I am not going to put the vanity plate in here. I'm going to see if I can pause this. Hold on, let me see if I can pause this. I think I can. Did I pause? Yeah, I paused. All right, cool. So I have the L that goes in there, and you can see I have the vanity plate. I am not going to do that. So what my plan is to do it just like you see it here. So the amp will go in a cabinet. It'll have the corners. I'm going to probably use carbon fiber style. This is my initial plan. We can vote on this stuff later, of course. But carbon fiber style Tolex or something along those lines. I will have some sort of a veneer on the inside, because I do want the internals to be seen. Based on what I can tell, I think the holes will be covered up enough that were butchered in there from whoever changed out the transformers the last time, which means that you can all see all the writing and all the fun stuff that's in there unimpeded or unimpinged, if you will. I will put a mirror in the back like I normally do, except for I will emboss inside of that mirror Andy's logo. So it'll say YDNA in the back there. I have a trick I want to try where I laser out the back side of the mirror, and when you backlight the mirror, all you do is see, the wording or whatnot through the mirror. So that's the plan there. I won't be changing the faceplates or anything like that. It'll probably have something similar to this going on. This is kind of, I think, going to be a staple for me now. I really, really like having the metal ring around the outside. I may also do wood as well. Wood is quite cool. Well, again, obviously vote on that kind of stuff as well. But, being that this is a heavier, I'm using my quotation fingers, metal style amp, if you will, Soldano SLO style amp, if you will. Obviously, that's kind of the direction we need to go. So that's why we're looking at darker colors and yada, yada, yada. So that's the hope with that. And then we have not worked that part out yet on who is going to actually raffle it off. It might be a waste to send it across the country again to have him check it out and then do it, but I'm not against doing that. I think it would be cool for him to check it out and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll figure that all out. Now, for coming off of this now and then going back to me, because it's always all about me. For the new build that I got going on, it's probably going to come after I get the Cerberus done. I kind of want to get that out of the way, because that one's probably going to take a little bit longer. I want to get that done because that one I want to buy some time in order to get some hype done up on it and stuff like that. And then whoever wins it will really get to win it this time, and hopefully they'll take better care of it. It sounds like the last owners of it kind of decided to go a different way with it, and Andy, of course, bought his own amp back and then sent it to me to try to play with. So we're going to try to just keep the ball rolling on that one. That's all. Now, as far as my amp thing goes, the giveaway, kind of going back and forth a little bit here, but I can tell you right now I'm never going to do another giveaway again quite like I have this time. I can't say that I've ever put this amount of work into something that nobody seems to really want that bad, except for the few that really, really, truly do seem to want it. For those of you who don't know, I spent a shit ton of freaking money on it. And not a shit ton, but I mean $1,500 and then 200 plus hours of time is something, and that doesn't even probably factor in the video amount of the amount of video time spent on that thing. So in the future there will be some sort of giveaway process, but it might be through a more formal kind of raffling system. I don't know what the terms of service thing is on YouTube, but I know that they do giveaways all the time. So I don't see why it's going to be a problem, because I know that you can pay to get in. But it'll be a little while before we do. Another giveaway like that. I am not going to be giving away my high gain amp, so just know that already. That will be a prototype. I have no idea where that one's going to go. 10-4, my man. We'll talk in a bit. But anyway, train of thought. So I am gonna try to do the high gain amp build of mine all live. So that is the plan at the moment. I'm going to try to figure it out. I already have 2 spare monitors in here. I've got 2 extra monitors that I can do with this. And the idea behind that is to have at least, I've got 2 cameras at the moment. I want to get a 3rd camera. I'm trying to see how I can manage all this stuff and make it all work. But in either case, the goal will be to do multiple camera views, and I want to have a way where I can see kind of your chat flow in a larger screen. We will do that, my man, for sure. So we're going to try to make it so I can see the chat flow on a screen so I can kind of answer questions in real time, because I'm going to try to do it more or less like a master class, if you will, kind of like Andy's, but I'm just going to do what I do. You get to hear all the cursing and me bitching and moaning about how stupid things are, because things are just stupid sometimes. I use aluminum chassis, which are much, much easier to deal with, but that does not mean that they're not fun to drill out. I'm not as brutal as Andy is with his half horsepower unit that he goes in on town with. I'm using just a little Ryobi thing, and I really try to make. So for those of you who do not know, I do not paint my chassis. So I use aluminum. I use the nice thick, like 2 mil stuff. So that stuff, when you mess it up, you mess it up. Like it's done. Like you either have to reface the whole damn thing or junk it, right? So you drill one wrong hole, it's game over. There's no welding it back in and stuff like that. Like it's game over. So I'm one of those kinds that like measures 3 or 4 times and drills once. But the bigger holes are still a challenge, especially with aluminum, because you don't want any of the little frays to get around and scratch anything up. And it's happened before on an amp. And luckily, I was able to clean it up enough that you didn't notice it. But so I yell and I scream and I bitch and I moan and all that fun stuff, just like anybody else. So, Randy, how's it going, dude? Good to see you. I am going to try to do it all live, though. That's the plan. I don't want to try to cut anything out. I don't know how it's going to be exactly. Obviously, we're going to probably show my face when I do the giveaway, so that's already kind of out of the bag anyway. And if you actually want to see what I look like, go to my last video and watch it, because fuck's sakes, it needs some damn views. 160 people, 160 views. I've got 2,500 something subscribers right now. And what I can tell you is that of the 36 people that have actually gotten an entry into the game. Like, do the math on that. It's like a small percentage of people, very small percentage. And you would think that with 2,500 people that even 10% would watch the darn thing. I don't know what it is about that particular video. I don't know if YouTube's messing with me right now. The video prior to that, I didn't do anything special with it. No special wording, no nothing. And it's, I mean, for my view count, it's usually pretty good. 350 plus or something like that. Some of the shorts I put out recently actually did really well. I got one that's like over 1,400 views. Lord knows, I can't explain it. It doesn't make any sense. So obviously nobody's gonna know what my amp sounds like if they do not actually go and watch the damn video. So if you even want to try to get excited about what you're able to win if you follow the damn rules, you have an opportunity, and that's what I kind of want to circle back on a little bit right meow. Is I did create a post a little bit before I started this stream. You can find it on my channel. Maybe I can find a way. Hold on, let me scoot around here and see if I can find it on my own, and I can share it with you because I'm cool. I can put it in the chats. Imagine that, right? Let's see here. So I'm going to go view my channel, manage videos. Let's see if we got anything here. Posts. I don't want to edit it. I want to view on YouTube. There it is. All right. So I'm pretty sure if I copy that and go to here and then go to here and Control V there. If you go to that, that will take you to the post. Everything you need to answer the question is in there. If you haven't watched the damn video, watch the dang video because that will tell you all the damn answers. And then you can actually watch the damn thing and see what the amp freaking sounds like. Imagine that. You want to win an amp that you know what it sounds like, right? Duh. I suspect. I hope you guys have patience. I have patience. I'm a pretty patient guy. But so what are the rules? The rules for what? There's always rules. Everything's got a rule. I'm just the master ruler. But anyway, so with the live, I don't know how that's going to go. I know that it's going to turn into a very long series. For most of my series of videos, I usually take small little snippets out, and then edit it down into what you see. I try to make things, I'll do like the fast stuff, where stop motion or whatever they want to call it. Well, that obviously can't happen when you're doing a live, so I don't know how that's going to go, but I can tell you right now it's going to be a brutally long process. The amp itself, not so much. The cabinetry is what takes so long. So, I mean, maybe with the amp, if we just do the amp in that part, we can get it down to probably a week, maybe two, except for I am going to kind of do this one a little bit dry. I am not going to go over like a schematic and all that fun stuff. We'll kind of keep that stuff out of it, mainly because I've already kind of done it a couple times. The power supply, we might go over the power supply just because I think that's kind of important to show you how I'm going to get to that point that I'm going to get to. And I could be wrong. I'm pretty good with my math and I'm pretty good on my guesstimations and stuff like that, but we might get to the point where we go to turn the thing on and plug the tubes in and the voltage goes south of what my initial guesstimation is. It's totally plausible that can happen. I might be off, entirely on what my idea of what my transformer can do. And boy, oh boy, let me tell you, this thing's a freaking beast. Do you guys want to see it? Raise of hands. Do you want to see the transformer we're going to use in this thing? Hands up if you want. Because there's 15 of you, so I mean, if like 4 or 5 of you are like, hell yeah, it's not quite majority rules, but it's enough for me to spend the time to get that thing out real quick, because it's pretty beastly. Just saying. Oh, and it's a real show now too. Well, there's one. Let's check it out. I'm gonna dig it out real quick. So let's show some iron. You'll have to excuse me a second. It's just buried underneath a couple things. Oh, I forgot how heavy it was. Oh. I forgot how big that thing was. Oh my god, that thing is freaking ginormous. That's what she said. Oh, there is Z iron. That is a beastly piece of iron. That's my hand. All right. About 5.5, 5 3/4 inches wide by 5.5, 5 1/4 inches tall by about 4.5 inches deep, thereabouts, right? And I swear this thing must weigh probably, it's getting to the point where it's uncomfortable to want to pick up. And this is the Canadian one here. This is not the made in China version they made. Yeah, this thing is a beast. So, how do you think I know that these guys here, 2 of which only just, do you wonder why I'm not really worried about whether or not this thing's going to power these? Now, do keep in mind, this is a 300-0300, so realistically speaking, it should only pop out about 420 to 430 volts off of these angry gentlemen right here, these guys. These 2 little wires right here, easily about 420 volts. But this thing is rated for, is it 5,700, 575? See if it tells me on there. 575 milliamps. This thing belongs more than 100 water. The problem is it's a KX, so it's a 300-0300. So the voltage that it'll supply is not enough to actually produce 100 watts out of these. But here's the reason why I wanted to go with this one. In the 100-watt design that I'll do with these tubes, the power transformer that will get these to 100 watts is the same size, right? So that's why I went that way, so I didn't have to have 2 different holes and 2 different things. This one will push a solid freaking 50 watts. What model? This is a 372KX, and the one that I'll use for the 100-watt version of this amp will be the... I can't remember which one it is. It's the one that's 350-0350, right? We'll put out 490 on these guys. And with 490, we can get these guys up to that. Yeah, it'll be closer to the 80 watts. But, I mean, it'll be 80 hard watts of straight-up clean power. That last 20 watts ain't get you nowhere. Like, maybe 1 or 2 dB more of clean headroom, possibly, maybe. And that's not to say that it won't produce 100 watts. It just won't be purely clean. This amp right here, what we're looking to do, clean, like absolute, no distortion, clean linear output, 50 watts, hard. I'm probably overworking the output transformer a bit. Let me grab that real quick. He's just a little baby. Compared to the power transformer, that thing is diminutive for sure. So yeah, I mean, this is just a 50-watt transformer here. Nothing crazy. I went with a 3.4 ohm, if you will. They're 3.4K, kilo ohm. Which, based on my math, with the amount of voltage I should end up with, will have a hard 50 watts right in there. I mean, if not 48, I mean, whatever. But our peak output power will probably end up right around 65 watts, which will just be on the north side of what this thing can handle. I originally was going to try to go with the 3.2K, but that was just a little too on the low side, I guess, if you will. So, yeah, the only reason I'm going to try to make this one work is just because it will work for the 50 watt and the 100 watt in terms of its size. The one that I do want to use will be the same size, it's just going to be 350. It won't be at 575 milliamps. It'll be more like 400 or 300 and something. So it'll work more appropriately for what we need to get on our 100 watt range, 80 watt range. Keep in mind, these things are only rated for technically 43 watts a piece. 43, call it 90 if you want to call it 90. I suspect solid 80 to 85 watts. We'll use an actual 100 watt transformer, of course, and that will be, where we kind of go with that. This one here, we're kind of pushing our luck, but the way my hope is that this one will work out is with a solid 50 watts of straight up power. I highly doubt you'd run into a point where you don't think it's loud enough. It would probably feel very close to about 100 watt, to be honest. I think so. Just because this guy here is not going to even know that these tubes are in the circuit. Like literally, I think I derated it down like 1% based on the amount of load that we're going to have. Two of these guys running at about 80 milliamps is 160. We're going to have 4 or 5 preamp tubes, maybe 6. So, even times 2 milliamps per tube, that's still another 12. So what are we at? Like 190. We're under 200 milliamps for sure. And we've got 575, which means we have 375 milliamps more current available in this guy than what the whole of the amp will be drawing, even at full bore, like full go. Which, most amps don't even have 375 milliamps worth of power transformer in them. Make sense? So that's why I'm not really worried about the voltage drop so much. This is a Hammond transformer, yes. Not a cheap one by any means either. It's about a $400 unit right now after shipping. A little over $400 after shipping, if I'm not mistaken. I got this a few years ago, kind of on accident. I ordered a 372JX. They sent me this. They sent me the KX, and I was just like, when I got this thing, I was like, holy hell, like, I can't put that in this amp. That amp is only producing like 35, 40 watts. Like, people are going to freak out. So then I just sat it aside and forgot about it. And then like 8 months later, I finally opened up the box and looked at it and saw the K, and I was like, I thought I ordered a J. And then I looked on my order, and I did order a J. I received a K, and they're like, sorry, error in your favor, but no, we're not taking that thing back, and you're going to have to order another one. So I basically got a $125 transformer for free, because that's about the difference in price. About $125. I want to say the 372JX that I normally get, about a little under $300. Hard work finding. Yeah, no, this thing is the beast. And they still make it. It's still readily available. It's in stock over there. I get mine from Hawk Engineering. I know we haven't really talked about where we source stuff from all that much, but this is an APD, so this is an Amp Parts Direct. Apparently, this is the same thing that Friedman uses in some of their amps. I can't remember if it's the Dirty Shirley or whatnot, but I like Hayboer because they don't paint their leads. And I've talked about this in some videos before, but even if they do get some of their, varnish or whatever you want to call it on their leads, I don't know if you can see that or not, but you can kind of just see the varnish there on that lower left-hand corner. Even if they do get it on their leads, it's clear, so you don't really notice it, and it's easy to get off. Whereas Hammond, and I don't know if they did it on this one or not. Oh, yeah, they did, of course, because they're Hammond. Hammond, I'm not even going to try to pick that up to show you, but you can kind of see maybe on some of these that there's black paint, like on the green here. You can kind of see the black paint there. I don't know what it is that they do, but when they're painting the core, I think they just use black spray paint, or they dip it into something with the wires in it, or maybe they hang it from the wires. I don't know, but maybe not with this guy. This thing's freaking too heavy for that. But in either case, it gets black paint all over the freaking wires, and I have to go through and scrape that off because I'm not going to give that to a client with this black paint on there. It's, like I'll scrape that all off and take the time to do so. So that doesn't help me at all. I hit them up about it. I was like, hey, I really would love to just custom order the same transformer that you actually make, but don't dip the wires. I don't want the wires painted black. And they said that that's part of the potting process, and that they will not warranty any amp that isn't potted. And the only way that I'm going to get that without that coating on there, without that paint, is to, not pot it. And I kind of thought, like, that doesn't solve any problems. I don't understand, like, why you can't pot it and then just paint it after the fact. I don't know. I think they kind of misunderstood what I meant. It might have just been it might have been a Friday at 4 o'clock when they finally looked at it. They're like, screw this guy. Here's the easy answer to get out of it. It's the only thing I can think of. But, if I grow to go where I want to go, I'm hoping I'll have enough clout to be able to tell somebody like him and like, hey, dude, you're going to make me this transformer, but you're not going to get an ounce of black on my freaking leads. Because if not, I'm going to send that turd back and you can do it again. No. So it kind of naturally grounds itself. And actually, let's see if I can show you here. Most of them, did they do it on this one? Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, it's this one here. So I don't know if you can tell or not. Shit, you guys are going to make me work. So on this one here, you can see there's a white plastic, like sleeve. So all of these guys are isolated with the exception of that one. And that one there, you can see it has a metal washer. And most all of them kind of have that. Usually it's a toothed one, but that's the only one on here that has that metal washer. All the rest are plastic. And then when, of course, you set this thing down, because I'm setting it down on the raw chassis, feels like more than 8 pounds to me. I can't recall. I think it's like 11 pounds or something like that. I'm weak tits, man. I'm freaking 46 years of age. Like, lifting that much weight up, I haven't done that since I was 20. I'm kidding. Anyway, so it's time for some more Eagle Rare. So yeah, big beastly guy, maybe 11 pounds, something like that. But so when you set this thing down on the chassis, you would think that it's not going to ground out. Well, I'm using aluminum chassis and I'm not using any coatings on them. I can tell you that by the time you get 4 of those chassis bolts, which in this one here, I'm going to have to use some beefy ones, right? We're not using the little 632s that I normally use. This one here, we're going to need some quarter 20s at least, right? But by the time you get those clamped down on this thing, this chassis is very much... This thing is very much grounded with the chassis. And I do check that, to be honest. And interestingly enough, the ones that have the plastic on them do not ground out, but the one that doesn't have it does. So they do, and you can kind of see it on this one too. Like, they use metal. They use a metal on both sides, whereas all these other ones are plastic. But they also use a sleeve inside. It's like a straw or something like that the screw goes through. So. No, I drink beer. If you catch a lot of my early ones, I always had a beer, but lately I've just been on a bourbon kick. It's just where I'm at right now. Not weak bladder. I usually do pretty good, but I mean, it's kind of nice to not have to take a whiz every freaking 5 minutes, to tell you that. I usually have my oil can, the Foster's oil can, so I don't know. Maybe in the streams I've just been doing this just because I think it looks better. I don't know. And it lasts longer too. Like, I mean, I got a whole bottle to get through, so we can be here for a while. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with that build. I forgot how damn heavy this thing is, but I'm only going with an 18-inch wide chassis. So, I don't know, man. I might have shot myself in the foot a little bit. So that's 18 inches right there. This thing will have to be at least right there in terms of spacing. And then this, I'm going to do it more traditionally, where they put the things on the opposite sides. So it'll be kind of like that, I guess. And then the tubes will be in the middle. And then all the preamp tubes will be up in here. So that'll be more like that, excuse me. So this is roughly the space that this is going to work in. I got an 8-inch deep one too, so 8 inches is about here. So we'll put that there. So this would be the front of the chassis here. These will obviously be split between this space there. These need about 4 inches from center to center. So, I mean, they'll be literally like writing, where my fingers are at, more or less. And then I'll put probably the phase inverter somewhere in here, or I'll run all the tubes along the front side here and then shoot things down the middle there. I have not decided exactly how I'm going to do the layout. That's why I kind of don't want to do my normal lives that I do where I show everything. It's going to be kind of made up in real time. This is a prototype, like literally a prototype. I don't know if you guys watch Uncle Doug. Uncle Doug just finished up his series today. He built a single-ended KT88 amp, and he did it kind of right on the same... that's not too tight. You'd be surprised. Not going to be fighting for wiring. Certainly not. You'd be surprised. Shorter wire is actually not that bad anyway. So like even if I got a phase inverter right here and then, the other set of tubes up here, we're going to be just fine. No worries at all. I don't know for sure if I'm going to go with the conventional like G10 boards like I normally do. I might just go with the strips, kind of like Andy does on the back, kind of high watt style, I guess, if you will. I might just do that. I haven't decided. But yeah, that's kind of why I'm not really we're going to kind of just make this up as we go along, and not really refer too much to a schematic. There's 2 main reasons for that. One is I don't necessarily want to just copy some other idea and run with it and then modify it. Kind of want to make it up as I go along. So what we'll probably do at first is get the phase inverter and the power section all dealt with. We'll talk about the power section and how that all works. We'll get the phase inverter done, and then I'll do my V1. My V1 will go straight into the thing. We'll see how it sounds, see how it plays, how it acts, and stuff like that. We'll get V1 tuned, and then we'll add another triode stage to it. We'll play with that and see how that works. And then once we get that happy, we'll add a third stage, right? So we'll add a second triode to that gain stage, and we'll tune that, see how that kind of works. And then we'll add a fourth and a fifth or however many more it takes. I do have an effects loop for this one. That's this guy right here. This is going to have to fit in there as well, somewhere in the back. So all of that's going to kind of come into play in one way or another. It is not the greatest effects loop. All right. So this is the best of the readily available ones, I guess you can say. Like this is good enough to go in many, many amps that you see in production currently. All right. So this thing works off a B+ voltage. So I'll feed it 350 some odd volts, or right around 300 and something volts. It'll probably get fed from the phase inverter node anyway. And the way I'm going to probably have to do this amp is to put all the nodes over here and then just feed them elsewise. We've got 2 of these guys that are going to have to fit in there as well. Those will obviously go over here on this side of the amplifier. So I have the brackets for these guys. So these are going to be for the primary reservoir and the screen grid. So those are pretty sizable there. These I'll have 200 UF, 200 for the main reservoir and 200 for the screens on these guys. So very highly filtered. I might do a 47 UF on the phase inverter, although once you get to the phase inverter, you really don't have to go that crazy. And then I'll do 22, 22, 22. Now, the way I like to do it, I want to not do a typical EQ topology. We'll come up to that here in just a second. So I like to have a node for every tube. So one tube means 2 triodes, by the way. So one tube equals 2 triodes. So one node for one tube. And then another node for another tube, and another node for another tube. And if you think about it in kind of like a cascading kind of way, by the time you get to this node here, let's say this is the last node or the first node in the amp, V1. It's the lowest voltage node because you don't really need all that much voltage, right? Let's say you have 250 volts getting to that node. Well, the next node up, maybe you want, 275. And then the next node from that, you want 285, right? You just kind of build voltage as you go along. And the idea behind that is that there's obviously more than enough voltage coming out of this tube here to slap the ever-living crap out of the next gain stage, right? You can get the next gain stage to go into distortion. You know that you can, because it only takes about 3-4 volts maybe to saturate the grid. The grid of the next tube, right? Well, keep on keeping on, right? You can kind of see why they use those networks that they do. So let's say out of my V1 that I usually do, and with 300 volts on it, I get about 10 volts off of its plate, which is pretty good. Like 10 volts is quite a voltage gain. I mean, you're literally going from 100 millivolts, maybe a half a volt at most, coming out into that tube, millivolts that is, and you're coming out at 10 volts, 9 to 10 volts on the other end. So that is more than enough to get the next gain stage to go into distortion, which is why it works so well with my amps, because I kind of rely a lot on phase inverter distortion. Now, you've seen them before. We've talked about it before. There are voltage divider networks that they add into these things, and it's basically a resistor. You'll see it going this way. So you'll see a resistor here and a resistor there. This one's going to the next stage. This one's going to ground, right? That's how you typically see it, and then this goes on to the grid of the next tube, which may have another resistor in line. So you'll see like a T network of resistors. Well, those first two, the ones that create that kind of that side of the T, those are the voltage dividers. If you do 470 and 470, it cuts the voltage in half. If you do 250 and 250, it's still, it's a little bit lower. It's more attenuation, right? And it's just the way that it works. It's kind of like a pot, but it's fixed value. That's all it is. So the larger you go with those two values, the more gain you will end up with. And it kind of has to do with your grid voltage, or your grid leak, excuse me. So most grid leaks are 1 meg, right? 1 meg is kind of considered the end of the line. So that's why they say a 470 with a 470 dumps half the voltage out. Right? So that's 50% of the voltage is just going to ground, doing nothing. Well, if you go with like a 250 and a 250, you're having it yet again, so you've got maybe 25%, so you've dumped 75% of the voltage away. And then you go down to something like a 150 and a 150. Well, now you've done something like 80 some odd percent or more of the voltage getting dumped away, doing absolutely nothing to do anything to the next gain stage. And that's how you kind of create those networks, and that's how you build gain through the amp, is by that kind of thing. Obviously, you could use volume pots in between each stage too, but when you got 5 gain stages, you can see how it will add up really, really quickly. That's a lot of volume knobs. That's kind of how Dumble does his thing. I mean, if you think about it, he doesn't have a whole heck of a lot going in there. He's basically doing 4 cascaded gain stages. So you got your primary input stage, goes directly through a tone stack, which we're getting to your point now, which is very, very lossy. A typical tone stack dumps a crap ton of gain. Not quite 70%, but right about 70% of your gain just gets wasted in feeding that tone stack off of a normal plate-fed circuit. So if you've seen any kind of topology of an amp, you'll notice that most Fenders use something off the plate, generally off the first tube, and then they follow up with another tube, which we usually call the makeup gain stage. Well, in Marshalls, they usually put the tone stack later on after the cathode follower. The cathode follower is just an impedance matching device, if you will. Its impedance is such that the tone stack doesn't load it down as much, and you don't really notice it. Split plate load resistors is also another way. I have done that. Actually, I do have a design that utilizes that. Split plate load, though, is tricky, though, because a lot of people don't understand that. That's a topic for another discussion, though. But yes, that is another way to do kind of the same without changing the apparent gain that tube has. So what Riley's talking about is a way to make the gain stage that you're driving act more or less as if it were normally, but the voltage that it pushes out to the next gain stage is significantly lower than it would be otherwise. So you keep the feel, but you're pushing a heck of a lot less voltage on down the line. It works really well, and it doesn't. There's always a gotcha in that. So you still have to think of it as what you load it up with, and it still loads up really, really easily that way. So it solves one problem, but it creates another. So getting back to the tone stacks, you can kind of see how they have their different things going. So the cathode follower definitely helps push through the tone stacks, and then you usually see that go directly into like the phase inverter of like your JCM 800 and stuff like that. Whereas in most Fender type circuits where it's, the next thing in line after the first V1 stage, you usually end up with another stage right after it that is making up all the gain that was lost from that tone stack. And then there's generally one more after that, in most of the modern circuits anyway, to create the actual distortion. Going back to Dumble, what does he do? He does V1 into a tone stack, pretty eccentric tone stack too, by the way, which is actually quite lossy depending on how it's set up. But he goes into a makeup gain stage, which is probably not breaking up unless you're using the FET input. It might be on the verge of breakup if you actually gain the amp all the way up. And then he goes into another stage, which I think if you'll notice, he'll have like that ratio knob, or he'll have that tone stack that's inside the amp that you can't get to externally. The trim, as it's known as, right? And then he'll have the other one that's called like the drive or the ratio, or whatever it is. But he actually uses a volume pot in between each of the actual gain stages. The ones that envelope the effects loop don't really count, although you can, I suppose, get those into overdrive if you want, but they're not meant to. The way he does his effects loop is not exactly the best way to do it, which is kind of why he came up with the Dumbulator. That effects loop, it's a buffered effects loop, more or less. And it's meant to solve all the problems that he had with his, in the amp version, I guess, if you will. So imagine adding another 2 tubes to that on top of it just to make it work right. So now you know why effects loops are a pain in the ass to add into an amp. So when you get into something like this here, which is using I think it's an LM150 or something like that. I can't read it right now. I'm pretty sure it's like an LM150. Whatever it is, they're not actually meant for audio, those LM150s. They're meant for more like high current devices and stuff like that. They're meant to deal with the higher voltages that we're working these things at. Most other like BS170s and stuff like that, more popular, I'll call them popular. They don't make them anymore, but popular. They're not FETs, but you know what I mean. Transistors anyway. They are actually meant to do audio and stuff like that, but they work at lower voltages. Well, these ones are meant to work at the 300 and some odd volts that we're supplying this thing, which makes it work more like the rest of the amp and integrates easier into amps that have tubes. So there's that. I've actually caught some of you here. I've lost a few, but there's 10 of you. I'm glad there's 10 of you. Yeah, stick around. There's always something more to learn. So there's that. We're going to make it work. This is going to go last in the chain, so anything that I have to do EQ-wise is going to address probably half the problems that thing is going to create for me. I will do testing with it and without it, of course. We have to. As far as EQ goes, though, I like to do lower loss and less, what's the word for it? Interactive. I don't like interactive EQ tone controls. So what I might do is I'll do my typical low cut that I have. I'll probably do it like Chieftain style. So in a matchless Chieftain, they do a bass cut and a mid cut in the first gain stage. And then they put between the first gain stage and the makeup gain stage, we'll call it that. And then after the next gain stage, they put the high cut filter. And then they have yet another gain stage to go on. So they split the EQ up into 2 zones. And the way that they did it is that the first two, the bass cut and the mid cut, really don't interact with each other. Small signal stuff isn't that much different. Like pedals and stuff like that, they're not that much different. You're just scaling the voltage up. You just have to be mindful of the things that they're using. In this case here, LM150s, not the best tool to do the job. It's not meant for what we're doing, but it will work for what we're doing. Enough. Anyway, it's probably not the absolute best option that we have available, but you can't run ICs at that level, or most readily available. We're talking like TLO 72s and stuff like that, the modern stuff that we really want to use. but they run off of 9 volts. And we can't really run these off of 9 volts because it's in a tube stage that has hundreds of volts hanging on it. So that's why this is the best that we have for what this is doing. Probably doesn't matter that much in your typical like solid state amp. In a solid state amp, the only high voltage rail that's in it is for the output section. Everything else is standard voltage, 12, 24 volts or whatever the heck it is. So kind of. It's not really a buffer. It's just an op amp or a transistor that's meant to work at this voltage. So it allows you a way to get signal into it so it can somewhat buffer it. I mean, it has a tonal change to it, if you will, but it gives it the drive that it needs to push through a cable out, and it has enough, low impedance stuff to work with it on the back end side, the return side, to deal with it. And then the reason I picked this particular one is you'll notice there's those 2 pots there on the back. You can see the little arrow looking things. So if you stick your whatchamacallit through there, your screwdriver, you'll see there it says send and return. So you can adjust the send and return levels. My understanding is on this, you never want to turn the send all the way down. They say that they calibrate it at the shop. We will test that. We will see. My objective is to make it so that when it leaves my place, or leaves my hands, they'll be set up in such a way that in or out, you won't really notice that it's in or out. That's the idea behind it. But so yes, the return stage does kind of buffer or pick up where your losses were. But if you can imagine, if you were to plug straight into the return side, you'd end up going right basically into the phase inverter. I'm sure that there's going to be some sort of implication for using this. Now, there is a tube-borne circuit that you can get, and they call it the best tube effects loop. I'm not sure how good it is, and I don't really want to use a tube effects loop. It's not really meant... The only way to do it right is to do kind of more of a cathode follower type circuit, which means using 2 tubes, which means using 4 triodes to get it to work right. And that's just so much. I don't want to deal with it. I'm not trying to make that kind of amp. So we're going to make it sound good even with that guy. Well, that's kind of what it's dumbing it down to, more or less. It's probably a little bit more than 1 volt. Reference voltage, I think, for like plus 4 dBu is something like 7 volts or something like that. I think plus 4 dBu is like right around 7 volts. I think 0 dB, like 0 dB straight up is 0.75 or 0.075 volts or something like that. So if you're going with the 0 or minus 10, there's obviously minus 10, which is, microvolts. No, not microvolts, but you know what I mean. It's low, very low voltage. And then you got the plus 4 dBu. So that's your studio level and then your pro audio level, I guess, if you will. Or home theater level. There's the minus 10 and then plus 4 dBu. dBu and dB don't really correlate with each other. They're kind of different mathematical equations, but plus 4 dBu is what we consider 0 dB to be on most things nowadays in mixers and stuff like that. It close is close enough when we're getting into that. Is it clipping? No. Is it close to clipping? Yes. Perfect. Send it. Is it more or less all you're trying to do is work out the noise floor, right? So you don't want there to be such a stark difference where, let's say this thing is expecting something up to here and you're sending it something down here, like it's got that much headroom. And then when you go to re-amplify it later, all of that space right there has to be amplified to make up for that loss on the other side. And what you'll hear that as is hiss. You'll hear that as tss. That's what that hiss is. It's shot noise on the resistors that are in line of that circuit that you're basically amplifying the noise of. There is more shot noise and more resistor noise in the first node than anything else in the rest of the amp. That's why it's not as big of a deal as you get later on down the line, in which case that's why you can get away with some of these things. And a little bit of mismatch on impedances and, drive and return levels, or send and return levels. Objectively, you're always trying to match the levels as close as practical. So that's why they had that whole thing. Eons ago with digital, they had the whole thing about using every bit that you had available, because it used to be counted literally in bits. And I think it still kind of is today. I don't remember. I don't know how much they really changed it, but they got floating point crap nowadays, so it never clips technically. But, let's say you had 100 bits of data to create, 0 dB. Now in digital, 0 dB is clipping, right? Well, so they would say you had minus X dB. That's why when you look at a digital mixer, they have minus 18 dB is kind of like the 0 point. Minus 18 dB in most digital mixers, not all, but most, roughly correlates to 0 dB as the actual measurement is concerned, analog-wise. All right, so minus 18 is just how that kind of worked out. That's not necessarily the truth behind it, but that's just where it kind of worked out. All right, so when you get up to 0 dB, you've got no bits left to turn into a 1, right? There's no more zeros and ones to turn over. And what you hear that as is distortion, crunching, clipping. All right, sounds ugly. Well, back in the days of yore, they didn't have that kind of depth or range built into it. Like it was analog trying to go into something that had a very small margin to get whatever it could get out of it. So if you did not fill every single bit, all those other bits turned into noise. And that's what you heard when you turned up the makeup gain. So let's say you sent in 50 bits worth of data, right? I'm just using that as a rough, wrap your head around it idea. You had 100, you gave it 50. Well, the way that they would do it is that those other 50 bits were still something. It still turned into noise. So when you turned it up later, you heard those other 50 bits as shh. That's that white noise that you used to hear in digital recordings. Now they've gotten rid of that with floating point, so you don't really notice it so much anymore. So, as long as you got some amount of input gain to make up for it, then you're okay, because it's not going to convert the unused bits into noise. It's just going to turn up what was there and make it louder, which generally by the time you have something that quiet, it was already a very low signal to noise ratio anyway. So that's all you're trying to do is beat the signal to noise ratio. Well, about the time they came up with CDs, they'd already beat anything that analog was ever going to get in terms of signal to noise ratio. A CD has, I believe, 116 dB of dynamic range, which is more than the human can determine. Like, that's more dynamic range than a human can discern. Whereas a record player, I know we all love records and stuff like that, has, I think it's like 80-something dB of dynamic range, whatever it might be. It might be better now, but then, at least in the 70s and stuff, right? And that's just to say that the quietest quiet and the loudest loud, that's the difference, right? So 116 dB is more than 80 dB. So the quietest quiet wasn't as quiet with a record, and the loudest loud wasn't as loud with a record, as it is with a CD. Once you get into CD range, 16 bits and yada, 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 it's got more dynamic range than a human ear can discern. That's all. I will not have a deep. I don't want to do that kind of crap. So I've only got 18 inches worth of chassis, and I'm not trying to fill all of it with a bunch of freaking knobs. And I don't want the output section to be a huge part of the sound of the amp, right? So it will have a presence circuit in it, but the way I kind of want to do the presence circuit is more, it's a fixed ratio, I guess, not a fixed ratio, fixed frequency, right? So it's going to send all the frequency around to linearize it the whole way, right? If you want it brighter, you brighten up the preamp, not the power amp, okay? So you got to think of how, I know, I'm over-explaining it, but I'm trying to over-explain it so that any new person that's here wanting to learn about it can kind of understand or wrap their head around what the idea or train of thought is. All right, so the presence circuit that's in the power amp section of an amp, we're going to relate to the JCM 800 because everybody knows it, right? You turn up the presence knob, what it's doing is it's siphoning out or dumping high frequencies out of that presence loop. And in doing so, that means it's no longer controlling those frequencies. It is almost as if it wasn't in there at all. All right, so it's not doing anything to control those frequencies. So you're adding brightness by actually getting rid of it from the loop. The only things that exist in that loop can actually get linearized by the power section, right? The way that it works. Okay, cool. So objectively, to do a real feedback loop, a negative feedback loop, the idea behind it is to linearize the output. That is to make it so that the frequency response that it provides is flat, right? That's the idea behind it. So what goes in is what comes out. It also helps deal with damping, the damping factor of your output speakers. So it gets rid of flyback or helps with flyback, and it makes the amp just act more nominal, right? So flat. So what goes in is what comes out. Well, without it, you end up with these humps, right? So now my fingers look all kind of humpy, right? They're fucking ugly fingers anyway, but that's not the point. But without the feedback loop, that's what it would look like. That's not what we want. We want it to be flat. Well, that's what the feedback loop does. Well, the presence control shunts the highs out of it, which actually makes you hear it as brighter. So it's just a shelving filter in essence, and because it's dumping those frequencies out of the loop, it makes it brighter. It makes it brighter by the amount that it possibly could be. So if you imagine what your amp would sound like by turning the presence knob all the way up, that's how naturally bright that output section would be without that feedback loop. And you can imagine it doesn't sound very nice. So yeah, the feedback loop is a big part of how the amp plays and reacts and stuff like that. So my idea or my thought process behind it with this one is I'll do fixed full frequency response. So what goes out of the output is going to get fed back into the feedback point, the negative feedback point. But what I will do is vary the amount of it that gets back in. So it'll be kind of like a loose, tight control. So if you turn down the feedback loop to its minimum point, which is to say it has less negative feedback being fed into it, it will allow the amplifier, the power amp section, to impose more of its character to the whole scheme of things. Or you can turn it up, more presence in the, not more presence, but more feedback being fed back into the loop, right? Which will tighten the amp up and tame it down a little bit more and linearize it a little bit more. Technically speaking, it would go from loose to tight. So loose being that there's not as much control over it, and tight being that there's a lot of control over it. That's my idea behind it. It shouldn't, in theory, change the tonality that much. I suspect that at lower levels, it'll have a little more bottom end, a little more flub to it. Perhaps a little more highs to go with it, more articulate, I guess, in that sense, but more in danger of getting out of control. Too flubby, maybe too bassy or boomy, perhaps. It'll resonate too much. Whereas as you tighten it up, you'll get to a point where the boominess goes away and it just tightens it up right where you want it, but you can get somewhere in between. That's my plan for it. Now, tonality wise or EQ wise, my intention is to do that from the preamp side of things. So I'll have to make the preamp work in such a way where it's bright enough to be too bright, but not dark enough to be too dark, etc., etc. Not too bassy to be too bassy. Like, everything is going to have to be controlled from the preamp side of things. So that's why I'm going to do everything the way I'm going to do from input to phase inverter. So I'll build along the way. And then we'll slip in EQ controls where they need to be. But that's why I don't know where they're going to go, because I don't know. I might go completely off the rails and do something I've never done before or never seen before, knowingly anyway. I might be able to do it with 3 tubes. I might be able to do it with 3 tubes, and it might take as many as 4 tubes or 5 tubes even to get it all figured out, right? Should have been taking notes. You always should be taking notes. Luckily, this thing will be available, so you can always come back. Just time stamp this part, right? We're what? Hour 14 in. Holy shit, we're an hour 14 in already? Dang it. So, yeah, that is the plan with this guy. So you can see there's a lot more that goes into it than just, oh, I saw this schematic and I just want to copy that. You can do that. That is a way to do it. And I talk about it in one of my other videos that, yeah, you can literally just go off of some other schematic that you've seen and kind of, reverse engineer it. When you're kind of treading your own water or, pioneering your own path, if you will, there's a multitude of different ways. I'm not breaking any rules. I'm not doing anything that's different from anyone else. I'm not, breaking outside of the box necessarily. It's just my way of getting from this point to that point is a little bit different. And we'll talk a little bit more about this guy and what I mean. Damn it. I don't want to spill that. That would be bad. Let's talk a little bit more about this guy and what I mean by that. So I mentioned it earlier that this thing is like literally 3 or 4 times bigger than it needs to be. Hey, how's it going there, Ghost Boner? So that means I'll have at least 300 or more, if not more. I'm thinking closer to 400 milliamps. I'll have close to 400 milliamps more power transformer than I absolutely will ever need for this amp. As far as this thing is concerned, those tubes aren't even going to be in there. Like, this thing isn't even going to know the amp's on. Like, it's just going to right? So thinking of it like that, that means that all the voltage that this thing will provide, it will provide. So 420 volts is, 424, I think, is what I'm actually going to end up with on my B+. I suspect I'll end up, after load and stuff like that, there is obviously has to be some sort of loss. It's not you can't get 100% out of it, right? Because there is a load. So I suspect I'm going to lose 5 to 10 volts at the most. So my hope is that I'll go from 425 down to about 415. Shooting for 420. 420, I think, is a little too optimistic. 415 is what I actually think I'll end up with. 410 is the low end of where I want to go with it. This will be KT88. Right? I know it's kind of hard to see with the way the lights are, but yeah, KT88s. And then you better get yourself some Eagle Rare. That's the good stuff, by the way. It's the good stuff. Age 10 years, come on. I need my dang sponsorship, damn it. By the way, my channel is finally monetizable. I'm actually finally making money. I made my first $1 the other day. Thank you to Short Circuit, by the way. I think since then I've managed a whole of $20 since then. Just saying. I don't know. So I was able to buy one of these. This stuff is not cheap. So that transformer was about $95, which is actually pretty cheap, to be honest. For power or output transformer, that's not that bad. Like $100 that's affordable. This guy here I was mentioning earlier is like a $380, like raw after shipping. After shipping, it's easily a $400 tranny. So she not cheap. So I've got $500 in transformers here, roughly. And, shipping and all that jazz included. The chassis I have coming is $100 raw. It's just literally a straight up box, right? No holes cut in it or nothing. So there's $600. This right here is about $120 in tubes. So we're almost $8. We're coming up on $800 just in simple parts. We haven't even gotten into the thing. You can see how this amp, just in and of itself, by the time you get in all the sockets, all the other fun stuff, I mean, there's half a dozen more capacitors and stuff to go. This amp is going to easily break, just for the amp itself, probably close to, I'm going to say 1,000 easy, probably $1,200 all in if you were to really sit there and nitty gritty it with the the screws and all the fun stuff to make it come together. And we haven't even touched the cabinet yet. And so now you know why I kind of get upset about these amp companies that come along and try to sell you this whole idea of a boutique amplifier that's handmade and the whole amp costs like $1,200, and you're just like, how? It just doesn't add up. So you know that they're cutting corners somewhere. Now, the way that some of these companies do it, like Dr. Z, is obviously they work directly with the providers. So, if it's Habo or Hammond that they're working with, they're buying in mass, right? So they're not buying one, power transformer at a time or one output transformer at a time. They're buying hundreds at a time. So, the cost goes from $95 down to maybe $65 or something. I'm just spitballing a number, but if this is $95 retail, I'm going to assume that $65 is closer to what the retail price is, right? So they can save 30, maybe $40 tops per unit. Maybe more, maybe not. Obviously, they're doing chassis. I think their chassis are made by somebody. So again, they're getting a bulk rate deal. Same with all the resistors and stuff like that. They're buying things for pennies on the dollar as opposed to $1 for $1. Not all of them are PCB. Some of them are. So, like, obviously, Dr. Z is not exactly PCB. He hasn't gone that way yet. He's still doing everything on a G10 board or Garolite board or whatever you want to call it. So that I respect about him. I think he's one of the last few, like, in his game, like at his level right now, right? The names that you know and have heard of on a daily basis. He's the last of them kind of doing that. There's obviously other companies out there that are doing the same thing. They're just not as popular. Tone King used to do it. They're no longer. They've gone the way of the dodo bird. They're owned by BAD. The stuff that you're getting from Tone King now is nothing like what it used to be. Hiwatt today, nothing like it used to be. It's all PCB. Hiwatt's not even owned by anybody in the Hiwatt family. It has nothing to do with Harry Joyce or anything of Hiwatt fame. Nothing at all. You're just buying it in name. Same with like the Supros and stuff like that. Everything coming out now from those names that you used to know as being the top of the line are all freaking PCB. Friedman, they make it look like it's kind of turret board, but it's eyelet. What it is it's PCB on a square rectangular thing that looks kind of like an eyelet board. It's still PCB underneath there now. They've gone all that way. It's not that it's necessarily bad. It's just not generally done right. So you have to imagine this. Here's the truth, the cold hard truth. If a designer or company, we'll say company, but can design and spends the money, R&D and all that fun stuff to make the absolute best PCB design that they possibly can, it can be better than anything that can be done on a turret board, period. Like, there's no doubt about that. Because you can do the ground planes right, you can get all the currents right, you can do all this, you can do everything right. But you don't even want to know how much money it costs to actually go through that level of, scrutiny to get a PCB for something like this that you're trying to sell for the bottom dollar, the race to the bottom I talk about a lot. You just can't do it, and it does not get done. There are most PCB boards now that you're going to see in any given amp is done for aesthetic purposes only. It meets the minimum requirements to get some of these currents and voltages that are flowing through there. A lot of them are probably not right. And you can tell on any amp that you've ever seen a burn trace on, that is a design flaw, period. Like, if you burn a trace, it means that they did not factor everything that they were supposed to have for that run of wire right there, or run of trace right there, right? So that's the only reason I don't agree with that, because most are not doing it right. They're doing it either for, like, literally there are programs that you can use to make PCB stuff. You put everything out, you connect it the way you want, and it will create some nifty looking circuit for you that looks aesthetic. You can change the way that the curves of the traces are. You can do this, you can do that. No, right? It's mostly aesthetic. Maybe not. Like they say, double-sided is cool. Double-sided is only cool if they use like really thick, fiberboard or whatnot, because you need distance for some of these things. Obviously, you want to try to get things to flow so they crissy-cross, not run parallel with each other. Sometimes it doesn't matter, sometimes it does, but when you've got something on top of the board running in one direction, you got another thing running on the board in the other direction, if they're in close proximity, there is something that goes on. There's some sort of capacitance that goes on. Again, it's not that it can't be done, it's just that it generally isn't done. It can be done. Most don't do it because it would cost absolutely inane amounts of money to actually do it right. These things aren't going into space. These things are not, doing something that's mission critical. It's realistically just an amp that somebody makes noise out of. So they're not going to spend that kind of money and time on it. So in that case, when we're talking about the voltages and currents that most of these things are working at, a PCB is not going to work as well as a turret board. That's just my personal opinion. And then just the longevity of it. Like, I dare say, yeah, you can get 50 years out of a PCB amp, that's never been opened, never been touched, never been serviced. As soon as you have to start servicing that amp, it's counted in number of times it's been opened. You open it once, you might get away with it. You open it twice to do a service, you might get away with it. Third time, I don't know that you're going to get away with it a third time, especially if you're changing out the same parts. Certainly by the fourth time you open that amp up and service it, it's probably dead already. Like there's no coming back from it. And 50 years would be highly amazing. But we do have some 70s era amps that are made on PCBs that are just now kind of coming into more, more servicing, I should say. Whereas amps that are made with turrets, like we already know those things are going to last more than 50 years. Like even the ones with the eyelet boards are doing that. My amps, I want it to be serviceable for life. Like I know how many times I can take a board apart and rewrite a part. Like I probably can do it 100 times on a turret board, right? 100 times before that turret board is so thrashed, or that turret is so thrashed that I can no longer possibly use it anymore. Well, what do? You drill it out, pop another one in. Imagine that. Oh, darn. The freaking wire that was down there got all melted and stuff. Well, what do you know? You just take the turret board out, turn it over, replace the damn wire. Off to the races, right? Turret boards are just, they're lifelong products. That's it, really. It's just, there is no arguing about that aspect of it. A turret board, you cannot do what you can do with a PC board. You're not going to have 6 channels. You're not going to have global this and that, EQ, effects loops, all that. You're not going to be able to do all that. But which one's going to last 50 years? Or at least be serviceable in 50 years. So, I know it's going to stay good for a while, at least for a while. I mean, I think it's that race to the bottom. It's literally that race to the bottom. When everybody's on that thing, like how do you explain it? Products aren't made like they used to be. Like we say that all the time. Like, so I have a family friend, he's passed away, but I had a family friend that, from the 60s and 70s was an inventor. That's what he did, is he invented things, and he did mostly toys and stuff like that. But one of his inventions was a re-roller of the adding machines. So back in the day, they didn't use calculators or calculators, right? They used an adding machine, which was like a typewriter, but it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, and all that, and you had plus and minus, all that stuff. And you cranked a handle, and it would run the sum and stamp it onto a piece of paper, just like a typewriter would. Well, every time it would do that, it would advance the tape. That's what they called it, was the tape. Well, he had a re-roller, so you could flip it around, or when it re-rolled it, you could put it back in the other direction and use the other side of the tape. Well, the company that he was selling it to said that he had to make it so it broke, right? So he made this product. It was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. But the company that he was pitching it to said, we want it, but it has to be able to break. We don't want a product that's going to last 100 years. We need it to break after like 2 or 3 years. Otherwise, we only sell it once. We never make another dollar off of it. That's how things are now. They count. There's like bean counters is what I call them. They're bean counters. They literally sit there and go, we know that this product will last at least this long. It will beat the freaking warranty. Anytime, even worst case use, it'll beat the warranty. And anything after that, we don't really care about. But we want to show where the value is on the money for it. So we want it to at least beat the warranty in 99.9% of the cases, right? And then they do that thing. I've talked about it before, the bathtub curve. So most products or most things either burn up pretty much immediately or not at all until the very end of their life expectancy, right? So if you have a 10,000 hour part, it's either going to blow up in the first hour or two or whatever, some percentage right up here. It's going to burn almost right away, or it's going to last forever until it gets close to that 10,000 hour mark, whatever that life expectancy is. So failure rate's high initially, it drops down, and then it comes back up, hence the bathtub curve. There's some other name for it. I can't remember it, right? That is factored into how all these things, warranties and stuff like that, are figured in, right? They know that under normal use, this thing will last at least this long. They know if it's abused this much, it'll last this long. Worst case scenario, it'll last this long. How do we price it? How do we get the price down to this point here where we know that in 5 years, it's going to be long past the 3-year warranty that we gave it. So you're going to feel like you beat the warranty. I'm looking at my water heater right now, right? Right, and then it'll make it another couple of years, so you feel like you got some value out of it. There's mathematical equations for all that crap, and they figure it out, and then they design down to that point. They don't design up to make it last forever. They design down to make it last long enough. Same with cars now. Like, you used to be able to get a car, and they counted them in millions of miles, right? Like that was the idea. It was a million mile car. Now most cars, like, you're happy if you get 100,000 miles out of them before the engine or the transmission blows up on them. Hey, how's it going there, Blake? Right? Yeah, they're not built like they used to. Race to the bottom for 100% for sure. Like, the engineers are not thinking about life. They are thinking about 5 years. When are you going to get out of the warranty? When are you going to get to that point where you have met your value on that car for them? And of course, they want to move you back into another one of their cars. So they can't underdo it, but they can't overdo it either. Otherwise, you'll never buy another car. I want to say, like, my 2000, I have a 2001 Chevy S10. That might be about the last era where they might have put everything into the cars that they built at the time. I've got 250,000 miles on it. Never have opened the engine on it. I've gone through several radiators. I can't even count now. It's so many. At least 3 alternators, a few sets of brakes, and I did change out the transmission, but I only changed out the transmission because it was like getting close to 200,000 miles, and I finally had to change out the clutch. So I got the clutch to last damn near 200,000 miles on that thing. I call it the $1 million truck because you can't kill this freaking thing. Runs good now, but I don't know. I haven't had to do much to that thing. The AC has always worked, and everything's always just freaking worked. I don't know how to explain it. The cars are not made like that anymore, which is unfortunate. Okay, cool. 6N2Ps. Oh, you went that route with it. A lot of people ask if I've used the toroidal transformers. The answer is no. There's a couple reasons for that. One is they kind of have an odd look to them, and most people aren't used to it. And I kind of like things to have a look to it, I guess. Like this giant monolith here. That's what we're going to call it today, as a monolith. As you're expecting to see that in an amp. When you see a flat, round thing, it's just kind of like, oh, what's that? Cool. Technically, for the power aspect and even the output aspect, they do work better. They're quieter. They have a better power factor, which is to say they don't sag as much. They're just they're better in a lot of different ways. Problem: they don't really make them for guitar amps. So there's only a few companies that make them. And, I know you did. But you know what I mean? So they make them for guitars, but they don't have like the vast, options as like Hammond does in this standard format here. So yes, you can do it probably for, maybe 7/10 of your builds out there. But, getting to that 9/10 portion is probably not realistic, especially for when you're trying to, I've heard of Antec a little bit. I think I've looked into them. It just seems like a little bit risky to try. I don't know. I just feel like they're not as ubiquitous as these. That too, and I don't usually have a problem with noise. So, my amps are pretty freaking quiet. And it's just, if you design everything right, like, noise generally isn't a problem. And then these things here, it's kind of a known quotient too. Like, it's not like these things are power hogs necessarily. I think these things actually draw less current than like a pair of 6L6s do, if I'm not mistaken, even though they provide almost double the power in totality, right? Almost double. No, that's not true. I lied. 43 watts a thing, and then a 6L6 is 30 watts, right? So 13 extra watts, right, between the two. But 1/3 more power. We'll call it that. But it's, you know what I mean? Like, derating these things, like, these really aren't the problem. Like, you can find a transformer that will produce the power that you need, and you can get the rectification to work the way you want it to work. Going solid state and or, tube rectified, whatever it might be. you can figure that out. I like tube rectifiers, excuse me. And the only reason I really like tube rectification is because of the soft start. I mean, that's kind of a cool thing about it. Yeah, this is a ton of iron. Like, holy hell, a lot of iron. But the soft start aspect of it, and second to that is just it looks cool. I mean, you got this extra piece of glowing glass in there that you can see. It does have a feel to it, you know, a GZ34, even on a modestly heavy circuit, does have a little bit of feel to it, you know, a little give, if you will. Whereas something like this here with the solid state rectification we're going with, I got the UF5408s, I believe they are. Hold on, let me see if I can find them real quick. Yeah, that's what they are. Here they are. These guys right here, these are big old mofos. Yeah, these are UF5408s. Damn, my memory's good. These things here are pretty freaking huge. Like, they're sizable, right? Way more beefy than this circuit needs. But they also run quieter than your typical 1N 4007, right? So I'm doing that. I also got a set of thermistors in. Let's see if I can find those. There they are. See, I got everything like ready to go for the most part. I haven't even opened these yet, so I don't even know how they look. So thermistors, I'm going to use a thermistor in this amp to kind of emulate having a slow start circuit. So I got a CL80, which that's a thermistor. So the thermistor at lower, well, it's based off of heat, right? So you turn on the amp, and this is cold, right? So that means the amp hasn't been on, and it's going to draw a lot of current through this thing. Well, because the way this thing is working, it won't pass much voltage. Like, there won't be a whole lot of voltage that flows. But this thing will start to get warm. And as this thing gets warmer and warmer and warmer, it will allow more and more electricity to flow to the point where it finally opens up all the way and the amp runs like normal. Now, why is that important? These guys right here. So I've got a huge energy sink right now. All right, like this thing here has got plenty of juice. It's got the juice. It's got the things that can get things going. These guys here are pretty big. I'm going to have 200 UF per, well, for the first two nodes anyway, for the reservoir and for the screen node. Now, an electrolytic capacitor, when it has discharged or has, you know, no more voltage sitting in it or stored within it, which is typical for an amplifier like guitars to discharge after time. This looks like a dead short to ground, right? So that's really, really hard on this thing when you turn on something that's got the beans and can send it all to this thing. Now, these are rated for 500 volts. Yeah, 500 volts. And I'm not going to quite have 500 volts, but the voltage spike on this thing possible can at least possibly get to that 500 volt mark, which will then just ultimately blow these things up. It'll be not easy on these guys. We don't want that. We want it to be a nice, gentle start, right? So that's what that guy's going to do, is give these things a nice, gentle start. So once these things have, 10, 15, 20 volts on them, it's no longer a dead short anymore, which even if that opens up at that point, faster and faster, this thing here has already gotten through its voltage spike. These things have already done what they need to do to kind of keep up with things, and then the amp just kind of swells to life. It's just this thing here is a life-prolonging tool. So that's what the thermistor does. And then they make another version called an MOV slash not varistor. Well, it is a varistor, but it works the opposite way. It uses voltage to shunt out voltage. So if you get too much voltage, it'll shunt all that voltage away out of the circuit. Kind of the opposite of what that one's doing. But in either case, let me look here. Such opposite philosophy on building amps. Oh, I want it to be soft and gentle. I love soft and gentle. I'm sure that they are. 325 is fine, but I'm going to have like 400 and... I'll have at least 430 right off the get, assuming no spikes. So I would assume that this thing, given the VA that it has, I mean, this thing here is a 575 volt or 575 milliamp transformer, like it's gonna right now give the beans. So when you hit that power switch, it's a bunch of fuck you coming right now. So I just want to make these things last a long time too. I mean, obviously, if we can make these guys' lives a little bit easier, they'll last a lot longer, which would be kind of nice, because these aren't the greatest. These aren't the greatest capacitors on the planet. They're good, but they're not the greatest. I probably, in retrospect, should have gone with like some Nishikons that were rated kind of the same, but at 105C instead of 85C. But these are good enough. These are honestly kind of middle of the road meets where practicality kind of ends. That sort of thing. Anyway. So I guess I haven't really explained what I'm trying to build here. High gain is what we're going for. So I want something that kind of lands between like a cross of a 5150 and a, dare I say, like diesel, like VH4 or something like that. Kind of shooting for channel 3. Excuse me. About a channel 3 level of gain out of this amp. I'm not trying to get retarded amounts of gain. If it gets anywhere near like a Soldano or something like that, it's probably going to be way too much anyway. I own a PV Triple X, which has way more gain than I need. I own a JCA 50H, which is more or less like a Soldano kind of circuit anyway, and it's got way more gain than I'll ever need. Both of them, I don't think I've ever gotten past 10 o'clock and held it there. Like, it's just something you do for a fun moment, just because I like saturation and I like the sustain. But yeah, I kind of want this to be something where you can stick an 8-string in front of it and get the chug-a-lugs and do your kind of, dare I say, gent, if you want to. But at the same time, I want it to have kind of that, that feel and touch that you can still have with a like a normal 6-string guitar. I don't want it to be so thin and neutered that it only suits like, down tunings. But yet at the same time, I don't want it to be too anemic or it's controlled, I guess is the term for it, really. When you start doing down tuning, you have to roll off a lot of bass to get everything to tighten up. And then you need everything to be so stiff because you still want to have a lot of bass, right? So we're talking like these higher wattage amps. Crisp attack and all that stuff, kind of a lot of it comes down to the power supply and the how the circuit on the power section side is tuned. Most of these high wattage amps aren't really getting into output section distortion. They're getting most all that work done in the preamp. The preamp does not sag like you think it does. It takes an inane amount of dropping resistor to get the preamp section to feel any kind of sag, right? All the sag that you get and feel, all the chew that you hear about in some of these amp designs, like a JTM 45, etc., comes from the output section and how it was put together, right? So JTM 45 has a GZ34 in it. It's a little bit weak on the filtering. That's why it's known for having ghost notes and stuff like that, or ghost noting and stuff like that. So it's not a very tight output section, and it's got pretty big capacitors in there. It's for coupling caps and stuff like that, so it's really big. So it sounds nice and juicy, but when you start giving it the beans, it's only a 45 watt amp, maybe on the high end, 30 watts probably realistically, 35 watts, we'll call it that, right? Well, when you start giving it the juice, start throwing down tuning in there and stuff like that, it starts to fall apart because there's nothing left to give. So this is going to have a solid state power section. So yeah, that's what these guys here are for. These are the UF 5408s. They're just quieter and higher wattage rating. I think these are 3 amp if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 3 amp. And here, I'll put them so you can actually read them. And they're quieter. So their on-off switching is just quieter than a 1N4007. 1N4007s work just fine for this amp. You'd have to pair a string of them per side. So I would need 2 in line for each half of the thing, so I'd end up needing a total of 8 to do it right. I didn't want to do that, so I decided to go with these guys here, which are more than stout for what we got going on. So yeah, we're going to have some fun in that regard. and then and just everything else in general is going to be way overdone. So these guys here have two 100 UFs in them, right? So it's 100 plus 100. So these are going to get paralleled with each other. They're rated for 500 volts. I'm never going to have 500 volts coming out of this thing. So that's how I'm going to get my 200 UF for each of those first two nodes, the reservoir and the screen node. Sacrilege. So the objective mainly with this build, and I may have touched on it earlier, is to make it as linear and as stout as possible. What goes in is what comes out. That's the idea behind it. It might be a little too stiff, but I don't think you can have an output section that's too stiff if you're relying on the preamp section to do all the work, right? Because if this is really, really, really stiff and like whatever goes in is certainly what's going to go out without any kind of, tonality or whatever kind of change you might think it might be, this guy here is the way to go, because then you have to build all that feel and all that tone into the preamp section. So that's kind of where we're going to lean on heavily. That's going to be the challenging part for me, is because I play 6-string. So I like having full, thick sounding 6-string guitars, but an amp like this is going to be more suited to an 8-string. Now I do have an 8-string guitar, so I can kind of get a feel for how this thing will work with, yeah, it's kind of Dieselish, right? And Diesel is known for having a pretty good like bass content. Like it's pretty full while still not being too, woolly, I guess. And I got to play a Diesel little Fokker not too long ago. Killer amp, and I think it might be KT 77s. I can't recall. I don't think it was KT 88s. I think it was a 100-watt amp, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Whatever it was, though, it was a killer little amp. The clean was a nice clean. It wasn't like Fender bubbly clean. It wasn't like the best I've ever heard, but it was a nice clean, right? Couldn't argue with it. By any means, you couldn't argue with it. And for something that had shared EQ and all that fun stuff between the 3 channels that it had, it did pretty dang good. The crunch channel, it kind of got you into that, mid-80s kind of feel and sound. Like it wasn't bad. It wasn't like what I would want it for. To have that JCM 800 kind of feel and crunch to it, but it did that. Obviously, channel 3, the lead channel, is where it was at. Yeah, I have an 8-string Schecter too. Schecter, it's killer. I love it. It's actually, I got it early on. I'll talk a little bit more about it here in a minute, but the channel 3 on it was honestly pretty impressive. I was thinking it was going to be thin. Now, keep in mind, I played with it with a 6-string guitar tuned normally, not down tuned or anything like that. So I was expecting it to be really, really thin, like all the other amps. I had a 5150, and it was just like you almost had to turn the bass up higher than you wanted to, and it was still kind of, by that time, it was kind of woolly and flubby. It was just weird, right? The highs, I've never had an amp where maybe it's just my luck, I don't know. But for me, most of the time, it's the high frequencies that get me the most, that just irk me the most. This thing here, the high frequencies were nice and smooth, but apparent, like it was clear and clarity and all that jazz. Even when you turn the treble pot all the way up, it wasn't like brash and overtly bright. It was just brighter, but it was right where it needed to be. So by the time you knocked it back a little bit to like the noon position, it wasn't, it wasn't dark and it wasn't too bright. And then certainly as you turned it down more, it got darker, but it was never like woolly dark. It was a very well-tuned EQ section, dare I say. So it was just whatever they did, they kind of nailed it, right? It had just enough brightness, just enough bass, and it had a nice lead tone, I guess, to it. Obviously, when you start diming them up all the way, they always get just out of control, just more than you possibly could ever need. I don't know that I'm trying to go that route. I think the Diesel, the little Fokker, I think the channel 3 on that is designed to be like either channel 3 or channel 4 of like their VH4 amplifier. I can't remember exactly what it's meant to be, tuned after, but in either case, it was impressive enough for me. I was like, okay, they did it right. Like, thankfully they did it right, because I've gone through a 6505, a 5150, and then a third 6505, and I got rid of them all. I had a PV Ultra 120, and it was a nice amp. It wasn't the best amp I ever had. It was a really, really nice amp, and that's what led me to get the PV Triple X. So when you start thinking of the evolution of these things, they came out with the PV Ultra series, which is like the predecessor to the Triple X and the 5150. So when I got my hands on the Ultra 120, I was just like, okay, this thing is, I get it, I understand. And I looked at the circuitry and I was like, okay. And then I looked at what the Triple X had and what the 5150 had. There's some variants there. You could see the evolution of it. And then I was like, okay, so the PV Triple X is the closest thing to what the Ultra was kind of doing on. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Triple X came out just before the 5150 launched. So you can kind of see that's where they kind of diverged some of their topology a little bit. And it wasn't like a giant shift. It was just a little bit of tuning here in the output section, a little bit of tuning there in the preamp section. And it just kind of did what it needed to do. I think they obviously the players that they were, attending to for each of these amps kind of settled the differences, right? JSX being, the Triple X, so it came out as a Triple X first, and then it came out as the JSX. Same, right? Yes, faceplate with the girls on it. Yep. I did. That was the first thing I did. It's actually on the back of the amp now. So all I did was I rotated the amp, 180 degrees. Maybe one of these days I'll do a little expose on it, but I put a mirror in the back and stuck it on there. It's my thing. The mirror on the back thing is my thing. So don't you dare copy it. That's me. So, in either case, I picked the Triple X came first, and then the 5150, and then they came out with the JSX, which is essentially the 51 or the Triple X. The JSX was the Triple X, or what was later dubbed the 3120 or whatever. Like the evolution of things. I think they knew that the trucker girl thing was like a bad idea to begin with. I don't know how they came up with Triple X and then wanted to put the trucker girls on there. I guess maybe at the time in the early 90s that was the thing. Couldn't tell you. I bought it just because it was so. The kid who owned this amp before me, the Triple X before me, broke a couple knobs off, and he was selling it at like $350, I think is what I got it for. I had to drive to LA to get it, but I live in Santa Barbara area, so it wasn't that bad of a trek. But I got home, got on the phone with PV because they still did parts for them. They were still in America at that time. Ukraine. Oh, yeah. I think I heard of him. I'll have to check him out, though. I'll definitely check that out. But, yeah, I called up PV and ordered the parts. Parts came in, and I was able to fix it up. It's got something going on with it now. The channels are bleeding with each other, and if you touch the gain control knobs, you'll hear it crackle in and out. It'll bleed the other channel in and out or cut the audio altogether. So something else is going on in there, and there's a little bit of a hum in the background. I think it's time for all the coupling caps all the power supply caps to get replaced. Mine is a version 2, I think. It wasn't the original one that they came out with, where the resistors, the screen grid resistors, were too low. So they had a variant that, because initially were released with 6L6s, but they allowed you to put in the EL34s, and then I think another version that they had it, just like the 6505, would allow you to put in, they what they call it, the 6305 or 6503 or whatever the heck it was, the EL34 version of it, right? Well, this one they did the same, but it was on a switch in the back, and initially they put 470 ohm grid stoppers in it for both sets of tubes. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't work very well or bode very well for EL34s. EL34s need to have 1K at least in most amp designs for their screen grids. That's where they ended up having to revise it to the V2 version, and mine is that version. And then they came out with V3. I can't remember what they changed, and then of course they went to the 3120 model. But so, yeah, the stiff thing, I don't know. I kind of agree and kind of disagree with that. So here's why I say that. If you make the preamp stiff, then yeah, everything's going to be stiff, right? Like there's no hiding behind it. Now the power section at linear volumes, or at volumes where everything is linear, and the power supply has enough to deal with it, and the output section is not trying hard, like it's just you're only doing a few watts worth of output power out of your 50 watt amp, right? The power section is not a part of the problem, right? At that level, I mean, most people, whether they believe it or not, just because you turn the knob up to 6 doesn't mean you're only 50% of the output, right? So even if you turn it all the way up to 10, doesn't necessarily mean that it's using 100% of the power that the amp has, right? It's a number. But for most bands, and I'm saying most bands, not all bands, but most bands are only using a portion of the actual power that the amp will provide. Unless they are getting into output section distortion, they probably really don't realize how little power they're actually utilizing. So I would say in any reasonable 100-watt amplifier, if you absolutely end up getting the volume up to 6, you might be utilizing all the power that it has. But on average, you're probably only putting out 20, 30, 40 watts maybe, realistically. So by the time you turn it up to 8 or 9, where you start to really get your ears bleeding and you can really start to hear things like come to life, you can't live there forever because nobody wants you in the building anymore, and you can't stand to be next to yourself anyway, right? That's probably where you're actually getting close to your limit. And a 100-watt amp, dare I say, most of them aren't really putting out 100 watts clean. They might produce 125 watts of like raw power, of straight up like actual output power, but it's their RMS, like the actual clean output power, the part that makes that amp linear and pop the way that most people don't like, that you can't hide behind it feeling that you're talking about. You're probably well beyond that point by then. All right. And you're already past the point of comfort anyway. A 120 watt amp really puts out a lot of power. You stuff that into a 4x12 that has 400 dB speakers in it, like a G12M or something like that. Or I think they're 96 or 100, whatever. Right? I mean, by the time you combine all those together, like that's a huge amount of freaking shit and get right there. Even if you only just double the sensitivity of that cabinet, a 4x12, right? And you put 400 dB speakers in there, sensitivity speakers. You would think that would add up to about 103 to 104 dB, probably. Realistically, that's probably it. So 1 watt in is going to produce 104 dB out. 2 watts in is going to equal 107 dB out. 8 watts in is going to produce 107, 8, 9, 10, 110 dB out. So you can see how with the doubling of wattage every time, you're going to get to this point where it's just astronomical. 105 is the typical volume for a rock and roll show. I've been in a couple rooms where 111 to 116 was kind of the going rate. You cannot be in that for very long. 120 dB is like the threshold of pain for most people, right? So that's, if you're not gritting your teeth by 105 dB, which most people start to grit their teeth about then, by the time you get to 115, 116 dB, you're definitely like on borrowed time. So the way that wattage correlates and how it feels are two totally different things. So I guess what I was saying with all that is that most high wattage amps, you're using a very small portion of what they actually can produce. But you have to recall, or you have to realize that it's a doubling of power that produces the next level. So, if you have a 100-watt amp and you cut it down to 50 watts and you only utilize 50 watts of power, it's only going to reduce an output volume by 3 dB, right? Well, if you reduce that down to 25 watts, it's only going to reduce an output power by another 3 dB. That's only a 6 dB difference. That's enough. That's a significant amount. But the headroom is kind of what you feel in that instance. When you start getting up to that 50 watt mark, that's when you're going to start feeling the output section do its give, right? And then, of course, once you start getting closer to that threshold, you're going to feel the output section more and more. Mm. Yeah. Well, I dare say that most people have not really truly experienced what it's like to be. I don't know. I'm spoiled rotten. Like, when I have an amp or an amp rack loaded with 10 or 12, L Acoustics freaking amplifiers that are each capable of like 6,000 watts a piece, and it's powering a line array 16 deep, and this thing is capable of doing 140 plus dB easily any day of the week, right? Like, a guy just talks into the microphone and it just flows out the room. Now, granted, that's a lot of shit, but it's a completely different thing than being on a stage 5 feet away from, your amplifier. I think most people would be surprised what 5 watts can really do. I wish I could quantify it, but my little 5-watt amp that I have, it has a 100 dB speaker in it, and or very close to 100 dB anyway. It's loud enough to play with a band. Loud enough. Now, I'm not going to say it's going to rip your head off, like it's not going to hurt you or anything like that, but, it'll easily break 100 dB. It might even get to 105 dB, which is, yeah, you play it like that, it's going to hurt. It's definitely going to hurt. And you're probably still not utilizing all the power. I typically I go by the gritting my teeth thing. If I start gritting my teeth, I know it's too loud. For me, that's right around the 103, 104 dB mark. 105 is pretty freaking loud. It's honestly pretty dang loud. So I'll try to keep it right at that zone, and then I have a pretty good gauge for decibels. Like, I know when it's hurting people, because it hurts me for sure. And it's not that I have super hearing or anything like that. There's the idea that a sound engineer has better hearing than you or the next guy doesn't actually exist. It's just our knowledge and the way that we work with things and our understanding of how to make these things work and do what we need them to do is just greater, which gives us better odds of producing X result. More or less the way you could say it is that the way that we hear things and the way we work with the tools that we have produces a result that more people will accept than your average punter. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm not the greatest sound engineer that ever walked this planet, but cymbals, I freaking hate cymbals, man. I hate cymbals. There's nothing I hate more than a drummer that uses a cymbal as an instrument. They are not instruments. The last thing I ever want to hear is you do that more than that length of time, and I'm going to freaking I want to just reach out and use your head as a freaking cymbal. I've had a few bands that have worked that way. And what they don't realize too is that gets in every single freaking microphone on that stage. So, if you got a pretty busy band with 2 or 3 singers, all those vocal mics are hearing it, and everything else. Oh, it's so angering because you can't get rid of it. Like, there's no, like, that sound just gets into everything. And yeah. And it's even worse if you got a drummer that sings too. Good luck with that. Sounds great in the studio where they can turn it down. Like, it's crazy to think. That's the one thing I've always hated about like pre or recorded music or canned music, as I call it, is that it doesn't sound realistic. Like, when you think about it, when was the last time you played your drums in a room and it just sounded like clean and pristine and like the cymbals didn't freaking rattle your teeth out and all that fun stuff, right? Like, when was the last time you hit the snare and it just popped and it had like this perfect echo in the room, and like that was the only thing you ever heard was that nice perfect pop and the of the decay of the reverb and stuff like that? Never in your freaking life. But on these recordings, that's what it sounds like. So that's how you can tell right away that they're like well produced anyway. But I try to make my recordings that I do pretty natural. Obviously, even in a live situation, they still kind of sound produced. But it's the only way you can do it. And as a live sound engineer, there's always how much the band has as, in relation to what the PA can actually produce. And I did mostly as a FOH engineer, I did mostly small to medium-sized venues. I didn't really do rock bands at like, arena level or anything like that. I maybe got to do like one or two here or there, but you know what I mean? Like, but I got to set those systems up and I got to be in the room while those systems were running and stuff like that. So, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, in a small venue, the band probably has 50% of the impact that, the patrons hear, right? So the PA system really doesn't have that much of an effect. Whatever you do here, they certainly are going to hear out there. And this just makes up a little bit of it, the other 50%, maybe even less. It might even be less. Whereas you get to a larger stage, when you start getting into the arenas and stuff like that, like if it wasn't for the PA, like you wouldn't even know that the drummer's on the stage hitting anything. Like it's that level of difference. So you have to have this PA system that literally has hundreds of thousands of watts pumping out all the freaking juice. So that's what makes it work. And it's crazy to think that a lot of this, like this modern PA stuff that we have today, these line arrays and stuff like that, didn't even start coming out until like the 90s. Like in the 1970s, it was still very rudimentary. Like microwaves were probably more ubiquitous then than an actual like real PA system was in the 1970s. In 1969, when they did Woodstock or whatever, it was literally like a stack of the 4-channel Shure. I have one like it, but it's literally the little 4-channel ones with the bass and treble, I think it had, just for the output. It was like a stack of 4 of those things daisy chained into each other to run the whole of the sound that everybody heard at Woodstock. There was more going on. There was like 3 times as much going on in the recording, section. It's because they recorded it all, right? There was at least 3 times as much going on in there than there was at front of house. It's just nuts how little it took at the time. And everything then was about efficiency. So we talk about like efficiency in terms of like speaker sensitivity. Like you only had, I can't remember how many watts it was done with for Woodstock, but maybe it was 1,000 or 2,000 watts total or something like that, which is unheard of now because most speakers these days have 1,000 watts in a PA system, right? Easily 1,000 watts in any given speaker. Well, back then, they only had 1,000 watts total. That means that the speaker had to produce every watt into output. So most speakers back in the 1930s and 50s and 60s, et cetera, were probably much higher sensitivity because they needed to be able to churn 3 or 4 watts into 100 plus dB of output. And that's the only way that they made it work, of course, back then. So if you can imagine taking, I don't know if you guys ever remember those pylon speakers that PV used to make. WEM used to make them, WEM. It was like 3 or 4 10-inch speakers stacked up with a little horn on the top. Oh, yeah, glassed-in drummers. I hate that, though. It's still, you're only solving one problem and then creating a total different one because you can hear all those damn reflections. And I can tell you right now, it doesn't sound good inside that glass shell for the drummer. If it doesn't sound good for him, it's certainly not going to sound good for us out front either. I'd almost rather just give the guy, like, there's nothing worse than a guy that walks into a gig that needs to be quiet and he's literally bringing in a fucking baseball bat. Like the things like the size of my freaking arm, and you're just like, really, bro? Like you couldn't have brought in some like 2As or something? No, man, I got my 3Bs. I want a freaking baseball bat this crap, man. And yes, I do understand those differences. So I used to be evil. So once upon a time, it's crazy. As a sound engineer, like you kind of have to know a little bit about what's going on with everything, right? I can play guitar. We all know that I can play guitar. I can fiddle fart around on a keyboard. I'm not a keyboardist. I'm not a pianist or anything like that, but I can make noise on there. I can play drums enough to say that I know drums, but I need to know drums more than most drummers do because most drummers do not know how to tune their freaking kits. I used to carry around drum keys and a tuner. A drum tuner, the little dial indicator one. I used to carry that around. The baseball, frick those guys, man. Unless they're really, really good. But I used to help guys tune their drums, and I'd be like, dude, like all I can hear is the dissonance between your batter head and the freaking, the resonant head on your kick drum here. Like, can we retune it a little bit? Like, I can't get anything usable out of it. And you're like, oh yeah, I don't know how to tune it. I just stick it on there and tighten it up. Like, oh my God. Same with the snare. It's just like you get this guy that's literally like, he hits the top head and it's like, boom, boom. And I was like, dude, is that thing even tight? Like, does it even go boom when you hit it? And he hits it and it's all, it's just like, what the hell? Tune that thing. Do something for me. Or you get like the toms, they had to go for 3 toms, and then they're just like, doom, doom, doom. And it's like, they all sound the damn same. Not doom, doom, doom. It's just doom, doom, doom. And you're just like, come on, my man. Help me. Help a brother. Help me help you. So yeah, there's a lot of times I had to tune stuff. Bassists, I know they like to tease bassists a lot. The only problem I have with bassists is when they think it's cool to rattle everything in the freaking house or building or whatever it might be. Like, I get it. It's freaking cool to hit the freaking low B and, shit's, thumping. But when everything's rattling 3 blocks around, fuck you, dude. When they got their freaking 1,000-watt freaking Eden or whatever, or their freaking 1,000-watt Ampeg or Warwick or whatever the frick it is, Mark bass, with their freaking refrigerator-sized 8x10, and they got the low knob turned all the way up, no freaking mids. They got no apparentness in there at all. It's just all click and boom, right? Like, they don't even need a drummer anymore, because all you got to do is slap the strings and go, that's the only time I get mad at bassists. And then when they have like no sense of like where they're at volume wise, like maybe where they're at 5 feet in front of that thing, they can't hear the everything come together. But what they don't realize is like, 25, 30 feet out, like that thing's hitting you in your freaking face, and it's just beating the shit out of everything. Like, you got the highest wattage instrument on that stage with the most efficient speakers and the largest amount of them, like, a freaking stack like that. And, like, this is him standing next to his rig, right? And then, yeah, so that's the only time I get frustrated. It's like, oh my goodness, man, come on, like, save something. Let me do something for you, because I can beat your ass with my PA system, but I'm not trying to beat you with everyone else at that level. We're talking about beating that 105 dB mark, right? There we go. I'm kidding. I'm sorry. That was my little rant for the day. Maybe one more of these and I'll rant some more. I love my musicians though. No, because as a musician myself, like, I kind of always think that way first, but I always want what's best for you guys. So I've said it before on some of my other lives, but like, my PA system is not a slouch by any stretch of the imagination, right? And most monitor rigs buy a self-owned PA system is the cheap side of things, right? So you spend all your money on the money side, which is the side everybody else here hears. No. Me, I love my band members so much that I spend all the money on them. I literally have a drum mic kit that's easily $1,400-$1,500 or more hanging over their heads at any given point in time. And that's only using 4 of the mics, not the entire mic kit, right? So, they got all the high dollar stuff on the drums. I'm busting out speakers that are nowadays about $2,000 a pop, and I got 8 of those puppies, pushing things back. And you would think it's entirely for the band. It's partly for me too, because those speakers are so darn nice. I don't have to do any freaking work. I just turn them on and they work. It's like so amazing. So here's what I'm going to tell you now. This is why they came out with that buy once, cry once mentality. And that's kind of why I'm not afraid to charge what I want to charge for my amps and stuff like that. Like, realistically speaking, I'm making a buy once, cry once product. It's going to hurt. It's not going to be cheap, and it can't be cheap because you can't get both, right? You have to spend that kind of money, but you only have to do it once. You never have to do it again, and it's never going to give you any problems, right? That's the mentality behind it. Well, Same for me. So obviously, if I've got a band member that's fighting with his monitor mix and I can't help him, and it's because of the limitation of that speaker, I have my own battle to fight. Because in a lot of instances, with a lot of the stuff that I was doing at the time, I was doing both FOH and monitors for the bands that I was working with. I did a lot of weddings, a lot of bar stuff, a lot of outdoor gigs and stuff like that. That's what I dealt with the band side of things most of the time. So having a pile of shit monitor did me zero bits of good, because the more you were fighting with it, the more I had to fight with it. And if I have to fight with it, that's a job. And I don't want to work any harder than I have to. So I went all out on my monitor rig, and oh my God, it was so worth it. I'm telling you right now, if you ever get a chance to work with some RCF NX12 SMAs, like they don't make them anymore. They finally discontinued them, but they have a predecessor to them now. I don't know if it's the ST model or some other N variant or whatever, but it's the predecessor of the NX series. But in either case, they're about $2,000 a pop, right? When you start getting to that level of money in a speaker, it's going to work. If you spend half the amount of money, you think, well, the specs are all the same. Like, what's the problem? I don't see how this QSC K12 has the same specs as this, $2,000, $800 to $1,000 almost more than this QSC K12. I don't understand. Like, these K12 sound great. No, there's a difference. There is a freaking difference, and I can tell you why there's a difference. It's how they actually do the work and measure those speakers, and just how they actually work. These NX series speakers that I'm talking about, my monitors, they're coaxial, which for monitors is the only way to go. Period. Nobody can convince me otherwise. I haven't found another one that does it better yet. So coaxial, which means all the sound sources come from this one little spot right there, right? So you got this 12-inch speaker, but the cone is in the middle for the things. And hey, there you go. Nice of you to join us. About damn time. You're late to the party. You missed all the good stuff. But we're talking sound now. So you got this 12-inch speaker with the cone in the middle, and all that sound emanates from this little spot right in the middle, which means it emanates kind of evenly around, right? Whereas in most other systems, you got your speaker here, and then you got your horn there, which means there's two different focal points, which means if you move this way, it's a little bit different than if you move that way. It's not that it's uber problematic, but it can be problematic, right? Another thing that makes them different is the way that they measure them. So like those NX series ones I got, they say that they will produce 129 dB max SPL, right? And most people are like, that's not even 130 dB. Like, what are you going to do with that? Like, get out of here. And then you look at like the QSC K12 and they're like, yeah, these things produce 135 dB. Do they? Do you actually know that they do? I can tell you right now that they do not actually produce 135 dB. What I can tell you is that the NX series ones actually produce 129 dB, right? So you have one that will actually produce the number, and then you have the other one that will get there, but Lord knows what it's doing when it does, right? It might be literally trying to blow itself apart by the time it actually gets that loud, realistically speaking. So how linear they are at those levels, right? So one will get there and it will do it, whereas the other one will maybe get there. So there's that. And then there's just the processing that goes on. Some of these digital speakers, like the K12, the QSC K12, they have a lot of, dare I say, DSP work going on. And that DSP is what allows that speaker to even get where it's at, right? One of these is not like the other. Well, the NX series is maybe the elements themselves, the horn and the woofer itself are so well tuned with each other that it takes very, very little work, very little DSP to get them to play nice with each other. And the less work you have to do to get the same result, the better the result will be, right? They do the work easier, and that's the biggest thing. Another thing I can tell you is that the NX series board flat. Like if you set them up in the way they're meant to be, which is as a monitor, so on the floor, pointing up at you, right? In the position that you would be standing in front of that monitor, it is board flat. And I'm not kidding. All the way from 100 hertz all the way out, it's absolutely board flat. I have measured it and confirmed it myself. That was their biggest claim to fame, is that it was linear. They are absolutely linear. And let me tell you, when you have a nice linear speaker to work with as a monitor rig, it is so much easier to deal with. Because the only thing that you're fighting against now at that point is the microphone itself and how it picks things up and how it interacts, this, that, and the other, as opposed to the speaker, which means it's much, much easier to tune out the problems. All right? So that's it. So, yes, I did spend all the money to make you happy, but it was to make my life easier, because it's all about me. Which is to say that my front of house PA speakers are not that bad either, though. I got the JBL SRX 800 series stuff. It's not the top of the line. It's certainly not an L Acoustics or a Martin system. It's not, D&B Audio Technica or anything like that, but it's about as close as you can get without spending that kind of money. An L Acoustics rigs that's similar in size would probably cost me easily 24 or more grand, probably closer to 30 all in. Whereas, my little JBL rig probably only cost me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 or 6 grand, closer to 10 grand all in for all the little interconnects and all the other components to make it come together, right? So 3x as much almost versus, you kind of get where I'm going. So you can't get much better than that for that amount of money. You're welcome. Well, you guys, I know we've been yip-yapping now for almost 2.5 hours. Sheesh. You're welcome. That's how you know it's a real show, okay? If you don't know, that's how you know it's a real show. So how many of you caught the beginning of the show? Show of hands. I know DJ Dross was a little bit late to the party. BC, you just showed up. James, you were a little bit late to the party. Short Circuit, you've been here. You've been quiet, but you've been here. I kind of started off the beginning of the show talking about the up and coming stuff that's going on. So just so you know, you can obviously see all this. You probably caught what was going on with this. I do have my new amp build coming up, and you probably have heard of that by this point in time. So that is coming up on Thursday. I am getting the chassis for this build here. Oh, nice. No, dude, band practice is cool. I wish I could do that stuff. I have a choice now. I work enough that I can either do this or I can do band, and I chose this. So that is going on. Another thing that is arriving Thursday, I will do that for you in just a second, Mr. Blake. Oh, then you fell asleep. I'm that boring. So another thing that's coming in on Thursday is Andy Lederman's, you probably saw it on his channel if you frequent his channel, but if you haven't, you've probably seen it in another one of his other builds called the Cerberus, which is kind of like a Soldano build. He sold it. Somebody did some stuff to it. They got rid of the cabinet and they exchanged the power transformer and output transformer on it. And then somebody else got a hold of it, and I guess it sort of worked, sort of didn't. There you go. And then somebody got in touch with Andy and said, hey, I got your amp. If you want it, $600, you come and get it. So Andy's plopped out another $600 to buy back his own amp. And then he sent it to me. So he doesn't expect anything out of me. He kind of wants me to keep it. I can kind of understand why he wants me to keep it. He wants me to obviously, hype it up and do stuff and all that with it. It's not that I don't want to keep it. I just don't find that fair, if you will. I don't think he knows this, but I don't find it fair for him to buy back his own amp and then give it to me without something else in return. So my goal isn't, I have a Soldano style amp. I'm sure his sounds better than the one I got because my little JCA 50H kind of sounds like Dooku, to be honest. But my plan was to bring it back to its former glory. I have a set of transformers that will work for the Cerberus to get it back to where it belongs, and it'll be proper. And then I'll build a cabinet again for it, or I'll build a cabinet for it. And then my plan is to give it back to Andy so he can either raffle it off, auction it off, whatever you want to call it, or I will do it. And it's just to get something out of it so he can get his, recoup his $600 or more. And, we'll basically split the proceeds on that and get just more mileage out of it, I guess. We'll get some content, too, because we'll get to see how it gets repaired, fixed, and we'll get some sound samples instead of just the iPhone kind of samples that he usually does. I'll try to do it like I did my last build, which you need to go check out that video, please. For some of you who have not or just recently got in here, we are redoing another game, or we are doing another game. So the last game that I had in here, I tried. Thank you. I appreciate that. But the last game I did, nobody has gotten the answer yet, which means nobody has scored any new points, which means nothing has changed. And I showed earlier, let's see if I have it called up. I do not. Here it is now. We'll just kind of recap on things here. So this is the desktop here. Sorry, I do have some music going. But you can kind of see here, this is what's going on. That's the point spread. DJ Dross, I actually do believe you have some points in there, if I'm not mistaken. I thought I saw you in there. I could be wrong. I don't know. But in either case, this is the point spread that I currently have. We got a total of 86 tickets at this point. So not horrible, but not great either. So we have another opportunity to win this amplifier. And we're looking... Maybe. So to kind of focus in a little bit more on what I was just yapping about, I am providing another opportunity for points to be made. That opportunity is in a poll that I recently just did earlier today, about 2 hours and 30 minutes ago. I posted a new post. Follow that. The description's in there on what you need in order to get the answer. The answer is in the post. So if you go to the post, there's a link to a video. Watch the video. If you watch the video, the answer is in the video, and then you will then know how to win the points. Cannot go wrong. So this is the last chance to make it so that Internet Money / Team YDNA / Team ATEX / John doesn't get to win the amp, because right now he's the favorite to win. He's got 10 points, as you saw. And this amp is beautiful. Let me tell you, it is a gorgeous freaking amp. And you wouldn't know how good it sounds unless you watch that video. I think it sounds freaking bitchin'. That's just me, though. So, there's that. That's the other thing that's going on. I'm going to try to do that, the raffle for me, for that amp that you just saw, next weekend. That's the plan. So, I have that poll out. Oh, you just missed it all, Blake. Dang you. You're going to have to watch the thing back. But in either case, that I'm hoping to do it next weekend, because the following weekend I did take on a gig doing sound. There's a pretty big event going on in my area, and I got hit up it was just too juicy to pass up, because I get to use half of my rig, and I get to get paid what I get paid to do what I do. So it's just like, it's kind of hard to turn down that kind of money for one day. So I'm going to do that. So that is on the week of the 27th. So hopefully next weekend we will do this drawing to get rid of that amp that you just saw. And if not, it'll be the weekend after that show that I have. So the first week of October, which would be like 3rd or 4th or something like that. So Blake, to get back to you now that you're back from banyo time or whatever, about the Princeton mixing resistor. So what is that question exactly? I am assuming that it has to do with the value and how it works. And I'm going to tell you right now that the value really isn't all that important, as long as you have one for each. So it's... Oh, well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. So the way that the mixing resistor works is you kind of imagine you got your 2 channels. Ooh, 3.3 meg. Ooh, I got to look a little bit more on that one. I imagine that mixing resistor then has to do with the tremolo, probably. Or is it for the reverb side of it? Oh, okay. So, well, I can probably find it. It's just a matter of knowing which circuit that actually is. So let's go Princeton schematic. Sir, let's see here. I'm going to assume that it's this one here. And we're going to make that larger so I can actually read it. And let's see here. I see a 1 meg off the vibrato. I see 470K there for that channel. I see another 1 meg to ground there. Oh, okay. I see what they got going on there. Okay. That's the reverb mix. Okay. I see what you're talking about now. Okay. Wow. I see what they did there. Okay. So what that is doing. Yep, okay. Dumps 90, yeah, thereabouts. So what it does is it makes it so that there's a difference between the dry signal versus the return signal, right? So you got to imagine it doesn't really resist the voltage that much. Obviously, you can see that bright cap that they have going over to the top of it. And if you're looking at the Rob Robinette AA1164 Princeton schematic, you'll see that they send a signal dry. You know, it comes right after the coupling cap there off that second gain stage that goes into the 12AT7, which then goes through the driver, that goes through the reverb transformer, through the reverb transformer, and then back in to the circuit. Well, if they were to get rid of the 3.3 meg and make it smaller, let's say, you would end up with more dry signal than you would that you could ever get of the wet signal, right? So it's literally just a mix. It's not that it dumps that much out. It's just a way to balance the amount of return versus send. So you got a 100K resistor, or pot that goes from the plate to ground on the second makeup gain stage from the reverb recovery tank, right? Or the reverb recovery. So it's a 12AX7. They send the signal into the front side of it, and then it goes through a .003, so they're literally pretty thin. I mean, that's like a 300 PF or something like that coupling cap, so it's not a lot of low end getting through it. And then they're using a 100K pot. Now, they probably could have gotten away with using a larger value pot there, but I'm guessing that the reason that they went with that is to get the range that they wanted out of it. I'm looking at this while I'm talking to you. I apologize. So here, let's go back here. Let's make it so you can actually see the desktop. Okay, and let me turn the music down because I don't need that on anymore. Okay, so you're looking at this guy right here. They probably could have gone with a larger value, but it would probably have too much of a sweep. Like low to low, highest to highs would be too much. So they went with this to give it the sweep that they wanted. They use a 470 there as kind of like a grid stopper. Obviously, you kind of need that for here. And this is essentially acting like a grid stopper for this previous stage here, right? But they're using this 10 PF over the top here. So they're letting a lot of the high frequency stuff sail in. Now, here's the interesting part. The way that that works with this guy here and with this guy here, I mentioned that there's not a lot of bass getting through here, which means there's a lot of high frequency stuff already getting in there. And they're already using a 500 PF, coupling cap as it is for this thing here. And it's not a lot. So a lot of highs going through in here. At this point right here, there actually is a little bit of interaction in the highs that will cause it to kind of mute a little bit. So it kind of fights itself a little bit. I see this as a clever way, but it's just a way to get the balance for the amount of dry signal versus the amount of wet signal and make this sweep work with it. So that's all it is. So if you go lower here, what you'll probably find is that when you turn this up higher, it'll get probably just too washed out, or the range that you need to get it where it's in the sweet spot will be too much. Obviously, if you make this lower and lower, you'll get to a point where the no matter how high you get this, it'll never be enough to swamp the dry signal, I guess, if you want to call it that. It's just a way to make sure that these stages stay pretty separated from each other. If you want to think of it like this guy right here and this guy right here kind of do the same thing. So if you went with a 470 there, it would basically kind of, if you wanted to look at it, it would almost be like 1-to-1. But that means that as bright or as much volume as you can get of this is as much volume as you would have of that, right? So that means that you would always have your primary signal getting through. You would never be able to swamp it with the reverb. Whereas conversely, you make this higher, that means when you turn this up more, you can have a situation where you have more reverb than you have of dry signal. That's how to think of it that way. Does that make sense? I hope that made sense. But your amp has nowhere. Okay. So it attenuates a little bit. So because of the way that those two come together at that point, the high frequencies, they do kind of tame each other out. So if you were to take two plates, let's say, right, and you were to connect them together without any kind of resistance between them, they will kind of fight each other and do a little bit to kind of cancel out. Even if they are kind of doing the same thing, it gets a little darker. And it just has to do with how the two tubes are not exactly the same, so they just kind of tame each other out a little bit. So you have to imagine that you're going through several gain stages there, right? You're going through one gain stage, two, almost three, I guess. Yeah, how are they doing that? It's tied together. So they're using the 12AT7 tied together. So it's, 1, 2. It's in the same phase coming back, but you've gone through several networks, if you will. So every time you go through a coupling cap, there's a phase shift, and every time you go through another coupling cap, there's a phase shift, right? And then you're going through two other stages of tubes. So there's something that's going to be different coming around the other side. So whatever those differences are is what it's going to fight and cancel out with, right? So there's that. But that's all that's doing. I mean, if you wanted to lower the amount of brightness of the dry signal, you can get rid of that that bright cap that goes over that 3.3 meg, and that will darken up your dry signal a little bit. I get the feeling that the reason they did that there was to make it so that it remained your dry signal ended up about as bright as your reverb signal, because they didn't do any high frequency attenuation in the other than that mixer resistor, that 470K. It's about the only thing they did to tame the highs out. So, and that's 470 with the probable drive that it has, probably not that incidental. So probably smoothed it out quite nice, but in either case, that's all they're doing. Any other questions? Because I think we're kind of rounding things out here. So there was that. I obviously talked about this kind of coming to fruition. We talked a bit about the power supply. Another thing I got coming on Thursday. It's going to be Christmas for me on Thursday. Okay, I see. Yeah, you can probably pull that off. I mean, you can use it as a gain stage. It's just, you just kind of got to think of it as another gain stage. I mean, that's literally what it is. So the mixer resistors just keep them from interacting with each other as much. The problem is that once you start getting over about 470K, it does start to darken it a little bit. So you'll probably find that you have to use, at least on one of the channels, you'll find that using a bright cap or whatnot will help retain some of the brightness. If you do it on both of them, it'll just cancel itself out, all right? Or it'll start to fight and interact with each other. If you do both of them together without any kind of resistance, it'll just sound muted and like darker. And what it is that what one tube is doing and the other one's not, it'll fight into that before going on down the way. Path of least resistance is the way you got to think about it. So that's why they put the mixer resistors in there. The larger they are, the more separated the channels or the two tube stages will be from each other, and the more they will act like you expect them to. Problem is that once you go up too high, generally about 470, they start getting too dark, because it does act like a grid stopper at that point. So 1 meg pot be best? I don't know if 1 meg would be better. You'll have to experiment with that. I don't know enough about that circuit to say with any kind of certainty. The only reason I can think of that they did with the value that they did was to get the range that they wanted, right? So, quiet was quiet and loud was loud, and there was a nice sweep in the middle. When you start getting into 1 meg pots, you can get to a point where the sweep can be like nothing, 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 and then it goes and starts actually doing something, and then it doesn't do enough, and then the last little bit, it's like all or nothing. Like, you don't want to get into that kind of situation. So using a lower taper pot or a lower value pot helps that taper kind of smooth out a little bit, or be less touchy, if you will. That's all. So, James, take care, my man. I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming in. As I was saying, on Thursday, it's going to be like Christmas for me. I do have t-shirts arriving as well. So not only do I have the Cerberus coming from Andy, not only do I have the chassis for this coming, I also have the t-shirts for the giveaway amp to include with that. The top 3, so the last 3 tickets that get pulled will get a t-shirt. Of course, the last ticket pulled out of the bucket will get to win the amp. I guess I'll just kind of plop it up here. Short Circuit, take care, my man. Thank you. Let's get back over to here. So, Short Circuit, where are you on this thing here? I think you got some points too. I'm gonna do one more overview of this before I call it. But I'm pretty sure you got one in here somewhere. I could be wrong. I'll double check everything to make sure that everybody's got their points. But I went through with my AI gal named Aurora. She named herself. I did not make her name herself. Well, I made her name herself. I said, hey, if you could be anybody you wanted to be, what would you be? She said, oh, I'd be Aurora. And then the rest is history. But I'm pretty sure that this is pretty accurate, at least. But I'll double check before. But we've got 86 tickets in the pot at the moment. So do make sure that you take your opportunity and get in on this last game. This is the last opportunity to gain a point. So I posted it earlier. I think I can post it now. Let's see what I get if I do this. Yep, right here. If you want to play the game, go to that link I just posted there, and that will get you to the last game, the last opportunity. It's really, really easy, to be honest. I didn't even make you watch the whole damn video to find the answer. If you can make it through most of the video, you'll get to the answer. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, just follow that link, watch the video, and then answer that question, and you'll get an easy point. You just have to do as it said in the thing. So you answer the question with A, B, or C, or D. I think there was 4 choices, A, B, C, or D. And then go down into the comment section and tell me what you selected. That's the way I can verify that it was you that selected that. Obviously, if everybody says I selected this and there's not that many votes for it, then we have a problem. And then you have to say last chance. So you have to quote last chance in there. And that's just, I have to make it a game. So if you don't put last chance in the comment along with your answer, you don't get the point, right? So that's the whole idea, is to just make you follow the directions and play the game. And easy point, right? Maybe 20 minutes of your life total. That's all I'm asking out of you, is 20 minutes of your life to win a several $1,000 amp. Is that asking too much? Alrighty, guys. So let's come back to me here. I have my Eagle Rare today. We're going to finish up this glass and we're going to head to bed. But I want to thank you so much. Oh, no. Yeah, I'll try to... I'll go through my text and see if I can find you. And is it the same number? Yeah, I'll send you a text. That makes sense. I can manage that, I think. So you guys, I want to thank you all so much. We'll see you in the next one. Take care. Goodbye.